Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Scroll to Sleep. Tonight, we're stepping away from the endless feed and settling in with some calming Reddit tales. If these stories help you find some peace and quiet, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's dive straight into the stories.
Story 1.
My mother taught 4th grade for 37 years. She knew every kid in Emporia, Kansas by name. She knew their parents. She knew their dogs. And when she died last October, at 81 years old, she left everything. The house, the savings, the land my grandfather farmed to the Flint Hills Animal Rescue. Every last penny. I wasn't surprised. My sister wasn't surprised. The only person who was surprised, or at least pretended to be, was our brother Dale. Because Dale had other plans. Let me back up. There were 3 of us. Dale was the oldest, 56, a real estate agent who hadn't closed a decent deal in years. Then there was me, Karen, 52, living in Topeka, working as a paralegal, and our youngest brother Mitch, 48, down in Wichita, running a small HVAC company. We weren't a close family. I won't pretend we were. But we loved our mother, and we understood her. She was a woman of conviction. She told us years ago, that she wanted her estate to go to the shelter. She volunteered there every Saturday until she couldn't walk anymore. She had it written into a proper will drafted by her attorney, Martin Griggs, in 2019. We all knew about it. Dale knew about it too, but knowing and accepting are 2 very different things. Mom got sick in March, pancreatic cancer. By May, she was homebound. Dale lived closest, just 12 minutes from her house, so he stepped in as her primary caretaker. At first, I was grateful. I drove down every other weekend. Mitch came up once a month, and Dale handled the day-to-day. Meals, medications, doctor's appointments. He seemed devoted. He seemed like the brother I always wished he'd been. I should have known better. By July, things started shifting. I'd call Mom, and Dale would answer her phone. He'd say she was sleeping, or she was having a bad day, or the doctor said too much stimulation wasn't good for her. I believed him at first. She was dying. I understood that some days were worse than others. But then I drove down unannounced one Saturday in August, and Dale met me at the front door like a bouncer at a nightclub. He said Mom wasn't up for visitors. Visitors? That's what he called her own daughter. I pushed past him and found her sitting in the living room alert, watching Jeopardy, looking confused about why I hadn't been around. She said she'd been asking for me. She said Dale told her I was too busy to come. My blood went cold. I confronted Dale in the kitchen. He got defensive immediately, said I was being dramatic, said he was protecting Mom from stress, said I didn't understand the burden of being there every single day. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "You think it's fair that everything goes to a bunch of stray dogs when I'm the one wiping her chin?" That's when I understood. This wasn't about caregiving. This was about money. Mom died on October 9th. Quietly. In her sleep. Dale was the only one there. He called me at 6 in the morning, and by the time I arrived at noon, he'd already contacted a locksmith to change the locks on our house. He said it was for security. Security from what? From whom? 3 days after the funeral, Dale walked into the Leon County Probate Court with a handwritten will. Dated October 6th, 3 days before Mom died. It named him as sole beneficiary of everything. The house, the savings account, the 40 acres of farmland, her car, her jewelry, everything. It cut me out, it cut Mitch out, and it revoked the bequest to the animal shelter entirely. He stood there in his cheap suit with his jaw set like he was doing something righteous, and he told the court that Mom had changed her mind at the end, that she'd realized her family should come first, that she'd asked him to write it out for her and she'd signed it. I sat in that courtroom and I felt my hands shaking. Not from grief, from rage. I called Mitch that night. He was stunned. Not because Dale was capable of something like this, we both knew he was, but because of the audacity, the sheer brazen audacity of producing a handwritten will for a woman who could barely hold a spoon in her final weeks. I told Mitch I wanted to contest it. He said he'd split the legal costs with me. And then I did what any paralegal worth her salt would do. I started pulling documents. I got copies of Mom's 2019 will from Martin Griggs. I got copies of her signature from her bank, her insurance forms, her tax returns, and then I compared them to the signature on Dale's handwritten will. It wasn't even close. Mom's real signature had a distinctive loop on the K in her last name, Kowalski, a loop she'd made the same way for 60 years. The signature on Dale's will had no loop. The pen pressure was wrong. The slant was wrong. It looked like someone had practiced her signature but learned it from a photocopy, not from watching her write. I hired a forensic document examiner out of Kansas City. Her name was Dr. Linda Pratt, and she'd testified in over 200 cases. She took one look at the will and told me off the record that it was almost certainly not written by the same person who produced the known exemplars. On the record, her report was devastating. She identified 11 points of divergence. 11, but that was just the signature. The content of the will was suspicious too. It used legal language. Mom would never have known phrases like, "I hereby revoke all prior testamentary instruments," and "per stirpes." My mother was a school teacher, not a lawyer. She would have said, "I want Dale to have the house." She wouldn't have written something that read like it was copied from a template. Because it probably was. We filed the contest in November. Dale hired an attorney, a guy named Rick Fenton, who was known around town for taking cases nobody else would touch. Rick argued that the handwritten will was valid under Kansas holographic will statutes, that Mom was of sound mind, and that she had every right to change her beneficiary. Meanwhile, Dale had already listed the house with his own agency. He'd already started showing it. He'd contacted a land broker about the 40 acres. He was liquidating our mother's life before the legal challenge was even heard. The judge issued a temporary restraining order, freezing the estate. Dale was furious. He called me screaming, saying I was trying to steal from our dead mother. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The deposition was where everything broke open. Dale sat across the table from my attorney and she asked him a simple question. During the months of July through October, did you restrict access to your mother? He said no. So she played the recordings. See, what Dale didn't know was that Mom's neighbor, Phyllis Underwood, had been keeping a log. Phyllis had tried to visit Mom 9 times between July and October. Every single time, Dale turned her away. Phyllis had also recorded 2 phone calls where Dale told her, and I quote, "Mom doesn't want to see anyone right now. Doctor's orders." My attorney then produced a letter from Mom's oncologist stating that he had never issued any such instruction and that, in fact, social engagement was encouraged for patients in her condition. Dale's face went white. Then came the bank records. In the 3 months before Mom's death, Dale had withdrawn over $14,000 from her checking account using a power of attorney she'd signed back when she first got diagnosed, before she knew what he was. Cash withdrawals, every one of them. No receipts, no documentation. When asked what the money was for, Dale said household expenses and medical supplies. $14,000 in household expenses for a woman who weighed 93 pounds and ate soup. The judge ruled in February. The handwritten will was declared invalid. The forensic evidence was compelling. The isolation pattern established undue influence, and the financial irregularities painted a picture that no reasonable person could ignore. Mom's 2019 will was upheld. Everything went to the Flint Hills Animal Rescue just like she wanted. But the judge didn't stop there. He referred the case to the county attorney's office for investigation of potential elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. As of today, Dale is facing criminal charges. His real estate license is under review. His wife left him in March. He's living in a rental off Highway 50, and the last I heard, he couldn't afford Rick Fenton anymore. Mitch and I don't talk about it much. There's nothing to celebrate. Our mother is dead. Our brother is a criminal. And the house where we grew up is being sold to fund spay and neuter programs and kennel expansions. Some people ask me if I'm bitter that we didn't inherit anything. I'm not. Mom made her choice with a clear mind and an open heart years before Dale ever got his hands on her. She loved those animals. She loved that shelter. And she loved us enough to believe we'd be okay without her money. She was right about us. She was wrong about Dale. But then again, mothers usually see the best in their children, even the ones who don't deserve it.
Story 2.
I used to run marathons for the silence. For those hours where the only voice in my head was my own breathing, my own heartbeat, my own 2 feet hitting pavement in a rhythm that told me I was alive. I need you to remember that. I need you to remember that I was a woman who ran 26 miles for fun, because what I'm about to tell you is the story of how a doctor looked at that woman, looked at me 17 times over 2 years, and told me the thing trying to kill me was all in my head. My name is Claire. I'm 34. I live in Lakewood, Colorado, about 15 minutes west of Denver, in a neighborhood with good schools and wide sidewalks, and the kind of quiet that makes you think nothing bad can happen here. I've been running competitively since college. Half marathons, full marathons, a couple of ultras. I'm not elite. I'm not sponsored. But I'm serious. I train 5 days a week. I track my splits. I know my body the way a mechanic knows an engine. I can feel when something's off by a fraction of a second, a half beat too many. And in March of 2021, something was off. It started small. A heaviness in my chest during tempo runs like someone had laid a sandbag across my sternum. I'd finish a 6-mile loop and need to sit in my car for 20 minutes before I could drive home. My resting heart rate, which had been a steady 52 for years, crept up to 68, then 74. I was tired in a way that sleep didn't fix, a bone-deep exhaustion that made me feel like I was dragging my skeleton through wet concrete. So I did what you're supposed to do. I made an appointment with my primary care physician, Dr. Nathan Harold, who I'd been seeing for 3 years. I sat on that crinkly paper in his exam room and I told him everything. The fatigue, the chest pressure, the heart rate climb. I told him my aunt died at 41 from a cardiac rhabdomyoma, a rare tumor that grew inside her heart. I told him my grandmother had one removed at 56. I told him I wanted imaging, an echocardiogram, a CT scan, something. He listened. He nodded. He checked my blood pressure normal, listened to my heart with a stethoscope for maybe 8 seconds. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "Claire, you're a young, healthy, athletic woman. This sounds like anxiety." He prescribed me sertraline, an SSRI, for the anxiety he decided I had in the span of a 10-minute appointment. I took it because he was the doctor, because I thought maybe he was right. Maybe the pandemic had gotten to me. Maybe I was stressed about work, about my marriage, about the 1,000 small things that pile up when you're not paying attention. I took the sertraline for 6 weeks and felt nothing change, except now I also couldn't sleep. I went back. Appointment number 2. I told him the medication wasn't helping. I told him the chest pressure was worse. I told him I'd had to drop out of a half marathon at mile 9 because I felt like I was breathing through a coffee straw. He increased my dose. He told me exercise-induced anxiety was more common than people think. He told me to try yoga. I want to be very clear about something. I was not hysterical. I was not vague. Every single time I walked into that office, I came with data. Heart rate logs from my Garmin, training notes, a printed family medical history that I had highlighted and organized. I handed him a folder, a literal folder at appointment number 4 with my aunt's death certificate and my grandmother's surgical records. He flipped through it, set it on the counter, and said, "Family history doesn't mean destiny, Claire. Let's not go looking for problems." Let's not go looking for problems. That sentence lives in my chest now like a shard of glass. Over the next 18 months, I went back 15 more times. 17 total visits. The symptoms escalated in ways that were impossible to ignore, except apparently they were very possible to ignore if you'd already decided your patient was an anxious woman who needed to calm down. I developed a dry cough that wouldn't quit. I started getting dizzy, standing up. I had episodes where my heart would race to 160 while I was sitting on my couch watching television. I lost 11 pounds without trying. My face looked gray in photographs. At appointment number 9, I cried. I sat there and cried and said, "Something is wrong with me. Please just order a scan." He handed me a tissue and referred me to a therapist. At appointment number 12, I brought my husband Matt because I'd read that women are taken more seriously when a man corroborates their symptoms. Dr. Harold told Matt that I was hyper-focused on health and that it was feeding the anxiety cycle. Matt squeezed my hand in the parking lot afterward and said, "We'll figure this out." But I could see it in his eyes, the flicker of doubt, the wondering if maybe the doctor was right. And that's the thing that almost broke me. Not the pain, not the exhaustion, The loneliness of screaming into a void shaped like a man with a medical degree who had decided what I was before I ever opened my mouth. At appointment number 15, I asked for a referral to a cardiologist. He said it wasn't warranted. I asked if I could get one anyway. He said he wouldn't feel comfortable referring me for unnecessary testing because it could, and I swear on my life these were his words, reinforce the anxiety pattern. I should have found another doctor. I know that. Everyone says that. But here's what people don't understand. I was exhausted. I was running on fumes. I was spending every spare ounce of energy just trying to function, to work, to train at a fraction of what I used to keep showing up to a life that felt like it was slowly dimming. Finding a new primary care doctor in the Denver metro area with my insurance meant a 4-month wait. I was on 3 waiting lists. I was trying. On October 8th, 2023, I ran the Denver Rock and Roll Marathon. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have, but I've been training for it for a year, and some stubborn, furious part of me needed to prove to Dr. Harold, to myself, to whatever was happening inside my body, that I was still me, that I was still the woman who ran marathons for the silence. I made it to mile 25. I could see the finish line. I could hear the crowd. And then the world tilted sideways and the pavement came up to meet my face and everything went black. I woke up in the ER, Swedish Medical Center, with an oxygen mask on my face and a cardiologist named Dr. Priya Anand standing over me with an expression I will never forget. It wasn't pity. It wasn't panic. It was controlled professional rage. They'd done a CT scan within 20 minutes of my arrival, standard protocol for a collapse with cardiac symptoms. And there it was, a tumor the size of a tennis ball, a cardiac fibroma pressing against my left atrium, compressing my pulmonary veins, slowly strangling my heart's ability to pump blood. It had been growing for years. It was clearly visible, unmistakable, the kind of thing that would have shown up on any imaging ordered at any point in the previous 24 months. Dr. Anand sat on the edge of my bed and said, "Who is your primary care physician?" And when I told her how many times I'd asked for a scan, she closed her eyes for a long moment and then said very quietly, "I'm so sorry, Claire." I had surgery 11 days later. They cracked my sternum open and removed a mass that had been slowly killing me, while a man with a stethoscope told me to try yoga. The tumor was benign, not cancerous, but its location meant it had caused structural damage to my heart that may be permanent. I may never run a marathon again. I may never run at all. My cardiologist says we won't know the full extent of the damage for another year. I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Medical Board in November. In January, I retained a malpractice attorney. We have all 17 visit records. We have my written request for imaging documented in his own notes, dismissed in his own handwriting. We have the family history I provided, which he acknowledged, receiving, and chose to disregard. We have a tumor that was large enough and positioned clearly enough that 3 independent radiologists have now confirmed it would have been detectable on imaging as early as mid-2021. Dr. Harold's attorney has responded. Their defense is that his clinical judgment was reasonable given the presentation. That anxiety is a valid diagnosis, that I was free to seek a second opinion at any time. And that last part is what keeps me up at night, because they're going to use my own persistence, the fact that I kept coming back to him instead of leaving as evidence that I trusted his judgment. They're going to use my loyalty against me. But here's what I know. I know that I walked into that office 17 times and begged a man to look harder. I know that I brought receipts, literal documented, highlighted receipts, and he set them on the counter and didn't look. I know that my aunt is dead and my grandmother has a scar down her chest, and I told him that, and he called it anxiety. I know that a tennis ball was growing against my heart while he told me to breathe deeper. I'm not running anymore. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I am not done fighting. Because the silence I used to chase on those long runs, I found a different kind now. It's the silence of a doctor's office where no one is listening. And I'm going to make sure that silence is so loud, it's the last thing Dr. Nathan Harold ever hears.
Story 3.
I still check the locks 3 times before I go to bed. Every single night. My therapist says that's normal, that it'll fade. But it's been 8 months and I don't think she's right about that. Let me tell you about the worst weekend of my life. My girlfriend Nadia and I had been together 2 years. I wanted to do something special. Not a ring, not yet, but something that said I was serious. So I booked this lake house up in the Catskills, a place called Heron's Rest. You've probably seen listings like it exposed beams, a dock with Adirondack chairs, fog rolling off the water at dawn. The photos look like a cologne ad. And the host, a guy named Martin, had 112 5-star reviews. People called him the best host on the platform. One review literally said, "Martin thinks of everything before you even know you need it." I remember reading that and thinking how lucky we were to snag the place. Now it makes my skin crawl. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in October. Martin met us at the door, mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, soft handshake. He gave us a tour, showed us the French press, the record player, the outdoor shower, told us the Wi-Fi password was taped inside the kitchen cabinet. He was warm but not overbearing, just the right amount of charming. When he left, Nadia turned to me and said, "Okay, this is perfect." And it was, for about 36 hours. Saturday morning, Nadia was unpacking her toiletry bag and she stopped. She looked at her open suitcase on the luggage rack and tilted her head the way she does when something's off. "Did you move my stuff?" she asked. I hadn't touched it. She shrugged it off. Maybe she'd just forgotten how she packed it. We spent the day on the water, cooked dinner together, drank wine on the dock. It was everything I'd planned. Sunday morning it happened again. This time she was more specific. Her sweaters had been refolded. Not just shifted, refolded. The edges were crisp, almost military. Nadia doesn't fold like that. Neither do I. I told her maybe the suitcase shifted when we bumped it getting into bed. She gave me a look but let it go. Monday morning, her last full day, she didn't let it go. She pulled me into the bathroom, turned the faucet on full blast and whispered, "Someone has been in my suitcase." 3 days in a row. My underwear is in a different order, Jake. I am not imagining this. The faucet. She turned on the faucet because she didn't want to be heard. That detail still haunts me because it means some part of her already knew. I wanted to be the rational one. I wanted to calm her down. But the look in her eyes wasn't paranoia, it was fear that I wouldn't believe her. So I did something simple. I took a photo of her suitcase with my phone. Every item exactly as it was, time-stamped. Then we left for the day, made sure every window was latched, and locked the front door behind us. When we came back 4 hours later, the door was still locked. The windows were still latched. But the suitcase was different. I compared the photos side by side. A silk scarf had been moved from the left pocket to the right. A pair of earrings was now sitting on top of a shirt instead of inside a zippered pouch. Subtle changes, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking. But we were looking now. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the sickening realization that someone had been inside the house while we were gone, and they had a way in that we couldn't see. I called Martin, told him we thought someone might have broken in. His voice was so calm it was almost sedative. "Oh no, that's terrible," he said, "but I assure you the property is completely secure. There's only one key, and you have it. Are you sure nothing was left unlocked?" He offered to come check on us. I said no. Nadia was shaking her head violently behind me. "No, do not let him come here." I called the local police. A deputy came out, walked through the house, checked the doors and windows. Found nothing. No signs of forced entry. He looked at us the way you look at city people who hear a raccoon and think it's a murderer. He said, "Folks, these old houses settle. Things shift. I wouldn't worry about it." After he left, Nadia sat on the bed and said very quietly, "We need to search this house, every inch." We started in the basement. Martin had told us during the tour that it was just storage, old furniture, holiday decorations, nothing interesting. There was a door at the bottom of the stairs, and behind it was exactly what he described. Dusty shelves. Boxes. A dehumidifier humming in the corner. But Nadia noticed the wall. The back wall was drywall, painted the same off-white as the rest of the basement, except there was a seam. Not obvious, you'd have to be looking. A vertical line running floor to ceiling about 3 feet from the corner where the paint was, just slightly newer, slightly smoother. I pushed on it. Nothing. I pushed harder and the bottom edge gave way about a 1/4 inch. There was a magnetic latch behind the drywall. I pried it with a butter knife from the kitchen. The panel swung inward on hidden hinges, and behind it was a room. A room where someone was living? There was a cot with a sleeping bag, a mini fridge stocked with food, a laptop on a folding table, clothes hanging from a pipe along the ceiling, and on the laptop screen, 4 camera feeds: our bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom. Live feeds. I could see our suitcases on the bedroom camera. I could see the butter knife I'd left on the kitchen counter. Nadia made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Not a scream, more like the air leaving her body all at once. I took photos. I took video. I filmed the cameras, the cot, the concealed door, everything. My hands were shaking so badly, the footage is almost unwatchable, but it's there. Then we grabbed our bags and ran to the car. I called 911 from the driveway. And here's where it gets worse. By the time the police arrived, a different deputy this time, plus a sergeant, we went back down to show them the room. The panel was sealed shut. Smooth, no seam visible. The butter knife marks were gone, covered with fresh spackle that was still slightly damp if you touched it, but visually seamless. When the deputy pushed on the wall, nothing moved. "There's no room back here," he said. "This is a foundation wall." I showed them my phone, the photos, the video. The sergeant looked at them, looked at me and said, "Sir, I see a basement with some furniture. I'm not seeing what you're describing." I looked at my phone. The photos of the hidden room were gone. The video was gone. Just the suitcase photos remained. Everything else had been deleted. Martin had access to our Wi-Fi. He'd given us the password himself. I don't know if he got into my phone through the network or if he'd handled it physically during one of his nighttime visits, but the evidence was gone. The sergeant took me aside and asked gently if I was under any stress. He asked if we'd been drinking. Nadia was crying in the car. I looked like a lunatic. Martin called me that evening. His voice was the same warm, concerned tone. I heard the police came out again. "I'm so sorry you've had a bad experience. I want to offer you a full refund." I reported him to Airbnb. They investigated. 3 weeks later, I got a form email saying they'd found no evidence of a violation and the listing would remain active. Martin left us a review. It said Jake and Nadia were lovely guests, though they seemed to be going through a difficult time. I hope they find the peace they're looking for. 5 stars. We hired a private investigator. He found that Martin had owned the property for 19 years. He found that the lake house had been renovated 3 times each time by Martin himself, no permits pulled. He found that 2 other couples had left early in the past 4 years, but neither had filed formal complaints. One of them had left a vague 3-star review that said, "Beautiful property, but we felt uneasy and left a day early." It had been buried under 100 glowing reviews. The PI also found that Martin had a background in home automation and security systems. We couldn't prove anything in court. The wall was solid by the time anyone official saw it. My deleted photos were unrecoverable. Nadia and I became the cautionary tale that nobody believes the couple who had a breakdown at an Airbnb. The listing is still up. I check it sometimes, which my therapist says I should stop doing. Last week, a new review appeared. A woman named Sarah wrote, "Martin thinks of everything. It felt like he was always one step ahead of us. Truly a magical stay." I stared at that review for 20 minutes. I don't know if she's okay. I don't know if she ever noticed. And the worst part, the part that keeps me up at night, the part that makes me check every lock 3 times, is that I don't know how many people stayed in that house and never felt a thing. Never noticed the seam in the wall. Never checked their suitcase twice. They just left their 5-star review. And went home.
Story 4.
I thought I was going to change the world. Or at least, one mid-sized tech company in Chicago's West Loop. Instead, I handed a monster a loaded gun and watched him shoot every person I was trying to protect. My name is Dana Whitfield. For 6 years, I was the HR director at Vantage Solutions' 240 employees Series C funding, the kind of place that had a kombucha tap and a mission statement about radical authenticity. I believed in that mission. I believed in it so hard that I didn't notice the man standing behind me, guiding my hand, pointing it exactly where he wanted. His name was Gerald Tate, CFO, and he played me like a piano. It started with a conversation in February, one of those casual, door half-open chats that Gerald was so good at. He leaned against my doorframe with his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and said, "Dana, have you ever looked into full salary transparency? I've been reading about it. Buffer does it. Whole Foods used to do it. Seems like the kind of thing that aligns with our values." I remember my heart rate going up. Not from fear, from excitement. I'd been advocating for pay equity audits for 2 years and getting stonewalled by the executive team. And here was the CFO, the money guy, coming to me and saying the quiet part out loud. I thought I'd found an ally. I spent 6 weeks building the proposal. I researched every case study. I drafted communication plans, frequently asked questions, documents, manager talking points. I consulted with our employment attorney who raised concerns I carefully addressed. I built the whole thing like it was a dissertation defense. Gerald reviewed every draft. He made small suggestions, always reasonable, always supportive. Maybe we include total compensation, not just base salary. Bonuses, stock options, everything. If we're going to be transparent, let's really be transparent. I thought that was brave. It was surgical. The board approved it in April. Gerald voted yes enthusiastically. Our CEO, Martin, was lukewarm, but deferred to Gerald on financial matters and to me on culture matters. We announced it on a Monday. By Wednesday, every employee's full compensation package was visible on the company intranet. Name, title, department, base salary, bonus history, equity grants, all of it. The first 48 hours were almost euphoric. People on Slack saying things like, "Finally, and this is what real transparency looks like." I got emails from other HR professionals asking how we did it. A reporter from Fast Company reached out. Then people started actually reading the numbers. It hit like a wave. Not all at once, but in these rolling shocks that moved through the building floor by floor. 2 women in engineering discovered they were making $31,000 less than a male colleague hired after them with fewer credentials. A black senior developer saw that his white counterpart, same title, same tenure, had received stock options he'd never been offered. A team lead in marketing realized the person she'd been mentoring for 3 years was making more than her. The anger was legitimate. I want to be clear about that. The inequities were real, they were systemic, and they were indefensible. I had known there would be gaps. I had expected discomfort. What I hadn't expected was the speed at which legitimate grievance would curdle into something personal and vicious. Friendships that had survived a decade of office politics collapsed in a single afternoon. 2 guys in DevOps who went to each other's kids' birthday parties stopped speaking entirely when one discovered the other made $22,000 more. A woman in sales told her cubicle neighbor, her best friend at the company, "I can't even look at you right now." People weren't mad at the system. They were mad at each other, as if their colleagues had personally stolen from them. And through all of it, Gerald Tate sat in his glass-walled office on the 4th floor watching. Within 2 weeks, he announced what he called the Pay Equity Restructuring Initiative. He framed it beautifully. He stood in front of the all-hands meeting, and said the transparency policy had revealed unacceptable disparities and that the company had a moral obligation to act. People applauded. I applauded. The restructuring started with the highest paid employees. Gerald's argument was elegant, the budget was finite, and to raise underpaid workers, you had to address outliers at the top. He presented charts. He used words like compression and market recalibration. He made it sound like math. But I started noticing something. The outliers being targeted weren't random. They were specific people. Tom Kerrigan, VP of Engineering, who had clashed with Gerald over infrastructure spending for years. Sandra Liu, Director of Product, who had openly questioned Gerald's budget projections in a board meeting. Raj Mehta, a senior architect who had filed a formal complaint about Gerald's attempt to offshore his entire team. Every single person Gerald had wanted gone for the past 3 years was suddenly on the restructuring list. Not fired, that would be too obvious. Restructured, given the choice between a 40% pay cut or a generous severance package. Most took the severance. Who wouldn't? I pulled the data myself on a Thursday night when the office was empty. I cross-referenced the restructuring list with Gerald's internal emails, the ones I had access to through HR's compliance archive. The pattern was undeniable. He hadn't identified outliers based on market data. He'd built the market data around the people he wanted to eliminate. The salary bands he cited were cherry-picked from surveys that excluded our actual competitor set. He'd used a compensation benchmarking firm that I later discovered his college roommate owned. I sat in my office at 11 p.m., staring at my screen, and I felt something I can only describe as the floor dropping out from under my entire identity. He had used me, not just casually, not just opportunistically. He had engineered the entire thing. That February conversation wasn't spontaneous. I found a calendar entry from January showing he'd scheduled it 2 weeks in advance. His suggestions to include bonuses and equity weren't about thoroughness. They were about maximizing the visible gaps that would justify the cuts he'd already planned. He had greenlit my idealism because my idealism was the perfect weapon. I went to Martin, the CEO. I sat across from his desk and laid it all out. The emails, the benchmarking fraud, the pattern. Martin listened. He nodded. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Then he said, Dana Gerald just saved this company $3.2 million in annual payroll. The board thinks he's a genius. Fast Company is writing a profile about our transparency initiative. What exactly do you want me to do with this? I said the right thing. He said the right thing is keeping 200 people employed. Gerald's restructuring did that. If you blow this up, we lose the narrative, we lose board confidence, and we lose the company. He wasn't wrong about the math. He was wrong about everything else. But I sat there and I realized something that made me physically sick. I had no leverage. If I went public, I'd be the woman who implemented the policy that destroyed people's careers. Gerald would deny everything. The benchmarking data would be scrubbed. And I'd be the scapegoat, the naive HR lady who didn't think it through. Gerald had built the trap so that exposing him meant exposing myself. I resigned on a Friday. Quietly. No dramatic exit. No whistleblower complaint. I told myself I'd file one later when I had distance, when I had a lawyer, when I was ready. It's been 14 months. I haven't filed anything. Gerald Tate was promoted to COO last September. He gave a keynote at a workforce equity conference in October. I watched the clip online. He talked about courageous leadership and the moral imperative of transparency. The audience gave him a standing ovation. Tom Kerrigan is doing contract work now. Sandra Liu left tech entirely. Raj Mehta moved his family to Bangalore because the severance ran out and the job market here treated him like damaged goods. These were good people. Talented people. People who trusted that the system I helped build would protect them. And me, I'm consulting now, independent. I help companies build equitable compensation frameworks. The irony isn't lost on me. Sometimes clients ask me about salary transparency, whether they should do it. I always say the same thing: transparency isn't the problem. The problem is assuming that the person handing you the flashlight doesn't already know exactly what it's going to illuminate and exactly who's going to be standing in the dark when the light moves on. I was the flashlight. Gerald was the hand. And I still can't decide which one of us did more damage.
Story 5.
My father died on a Tuesday. I know that because I was sorting the second delivery on Kirkstall Road when my phone buzzed, and I remember thinking it was probably a scam text because nobody ever called me. Nobody had called me in years. His name was Gerald Whitmore. He was 78. He'd lived in the same house in Headingley for 40 years, and I hadn't set foot inside it in over a decade. That wasn't my choice, not entirely, but I'll get to that. I'm a postal worker. Have been for 16 years. I wake up at 3:30, I sort letters, I walk my round, I come home to a one-bedroom flat above a chippy in Armley, and I eat something from a tin. That's my life. That was my life before the solicitor's letter arrived, and honestly, I expected it to be my life after. I was wrong. The letter came 3 weeks after the funeral. A funeral I wasn't invited to, by the way. My sister Denise handled the arrangements, and she told the family I was in no fit state to attend. I found out he was in the ground from a cousin's Facebook post. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for an hour. Not because I'd lost him a long time ago, but because someone had stolen my chance to say goodbye, and I knew exactly who. The solicitor was a woman named Patricia Oakes, small office on Park Row. She sat me down, offered me a cup of tea, and told me my father had left me everything. And when I say everything, I mean a property portfolio worth £2.3 million, 6 houses, 6 rental properties across Leeds and Bradford that my father had quietly accumulated over 30 years, remortgaging, reinvesting, building something brick by brick, while I thought he was just a retired bus driver living on his pension. Patricia watched my face and said, "He updated this will 14 months ago. He was very specific about his wishes. He wanted you to have it all." I asked about Denise. Patricia paused, and her pause told me everything. "Your sister's not mentioned in the will. Your father was quite clear about that. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sick, because I knew what was coming. Denise is 7 years older than me. She moved back into Dad's house in 2011 after her second divorce, and she positioned herself as his carer. And look, at first maybe it was genuine. Dad had a bad hip. He needed help around the house. But Denise didn't just help. She installed herself. She became the gatekeeper. Every time I tried to visit, there was a reason I couldn't. Dad's having a bad day. Dad's asleep. Dad doesn't want to see you right now. She'd call me and say things like, "He gets agitated when you come around, you know that." And eventually I believed her. I stopped trying. That's the thing about manipulation. It doesn't feel like manipulation when it's happening. It feels like you're being reasonable. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until the probate proceedings, was that Denise had been siphoning Dad's pension for over a decade. She'd set up a direct debit from his account into hers. Small amounts at first, 200 here, 300 there, but by the end, it was nearly the full amount. She was taking almost $1,500 a month. She told him it was for household bills. She told the family she was sacrificing her own life to look after him. She was bleeding him dry. When Denise found out about the will, she didn't cry. She didn't grieve. She lawyered up within 48 hours. Her solicitor filed a challenge under the Mental Capacity Act, claiming Dad lacked the cognitive ability to make a valid will. And here's where it gets truly ugly. She produced medical documents, letters supposedly from Dad's GP, suggesting he'd been diagnosed with moderate dementia 18 months before the will was signed. They were forged. I didn't know that yet, but they were forged. She had taken legitimate NHS letterhead from correspondence in Dad's house and fabricated the content. She'd done it carefully, professionally, like someone who'd been planning for this possibility. But the documents were only half her strategy. The other half was me. Denise started calling every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the family. She told them I had a drug problem. She said I'd been using heroin for years, that I'd stolen money from Dad in the past, that the reason Dad cut me off was because I'd turned up at his house off my head and threatened him. None of it was true. Not a single word. I've never touched drugs in my life. I barely drink. But Denise knew something fundamental about family dynamics. People believe the person who's already in the room. She'd been there for a decade playing the devoted daughter, and I'd been absent. So when she told them I was an addict, they had no reason to doubt her. My cousin Mark sent me a message saying, "You should be ashamed of yourself taking money from a dying man." My Auntie Joan blocked me on everything. People I'd known my entire life looked at me like I was something scraped off a shoe. I sat in my flat above that chippy, surrounded by the smell of frying oil, and I genuinely considered walking away from 2.3 million pounds just to make it stop. Patricia Oakes told me not to. She said, "Your father wanted this. If you walk away, she wins, and she's already been winning for years." So I didn't walk away. The probate court proceedings dragged on for 11 months. 11 months of my life consumed by affidavits and witness statements and legal fees I was paying with money I didn't have, putting it all on credit cards because the estate was frozen. Denise's solicitor was aggressive, theatrical, painting me as this predatory figure who'd swooped in on a confused old man. But then Patricia did something brilliant. She subpoenaed Dad's actual medical records directly from the GP surgery. There was no dementia diagnosis. There never had been. Dad's GP confirmed he'd seen Gerald Whitmore regularly until 6 months before his death, and at no point had there been any concern about his mental capacity. The letters Denise had produced didn't match any records held by the surgery. The fonts were wrong, the reference numbers didn't exist. When this was presented to the court, Denise's solicitor asked for an adjournment. You could see it on his face. He hadn't known. She'd lied to her own lawyer. But it was the bank statements that finished her. Patricia had requested a full financial audit of Dad's accounts as part of the estate proceedings, and what came back was devastating. 12 years of systematic transfers. Over 140,000 pounds moved from Dad's account into Denise's. No invoices, no care agreements, no receipts. Just money disappearing month after month while she told everyone she was sacrificing everything to look after him. And buried in Dad's paperwork in a drawer in his bedroom, Patricia's team found a handwritten note. It wasn't part of the will, it had no legal standing, but the judge allowed it to be read into the record. It said, "To my son David, I am sorry I let her keep you away. I was weak and I was afraid. This is all I can do now. Please forgive an old man who should have been braver." I couldn't breathe when they read that out. I sat in that courtroom in my post office fleece because I'd come straight from my shift, and I put my hand over my mouth, and I tried not to fall apart in front of strangers. The judge upheld the will in its entirety. He noted the deeply troubling evidence of financial abuse and referred the forged documents to the police. Denise was escorted out by her solicitor, who dropped her as a client that same afternoon. She was never charged with fraud. The CPS decided it wasn't in the public interest, whatever that means. But she lost everything that mattered to her, the family's sympathy, the narrative she'd built, the money she'd been skimming. Last I heard, she was living in a housing association flat in Morley, telling anyone who'd listen that she'd been robbed of her inheritance. The family hasn't apologized. Not Mark, not Auntie Joan, not any of them. A few have quietly unblocked me. Nobody said sorry. I don't think they will. I still work at the post office. I kept my round. I bought a proper flat, nothing flashy, just somewhere that doesn't smell like chip fat. The properties are managed by a letting agency now, and every month the rent comes in, and every month I think about my dad sitting in that house with her writing that note, knowing exactly what she was, and not being able to stop it. He couldn't fight her while he was alive. So he fought her from the grave. And he won.
Story 6.
It all started a year ago, the day my wife Anna came back from her friend Jessica's wedding. Jessica hadn't just married a guy, she'd married a trust fund. Anna walked into her perfectly normal, perfectly average 3-bedroom house looking like she'd just seen a ghost from the future, a ghost wearing Balenciaga. "You should have seen it, Ray," she said, kicking off her sensible heels and dropping her clutch on the counter. "The flowers alone probably cost more than our car." And her dress? It was couture. She wasn't just impressed. She was infected. For the next week, all I heard about was Jessica's new life. Jessica's infinity pool. Jessica's trip to Monaco. Jessica's husband who bought her a Cartier bracelet just for, and I quote, being her. I run a small graphic design business from home. I do okay. We have a mortgage, we take a vacation every other year, and we don't sweat the grocery bill. I thought that was the goal. Apparently, I'd been aiming a little low. The first change was a purse. A sleek, black leather thing with a gold clasp I didn't recognize. It was sitting on the kitchen island one Tuesday. "New bag?" I asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Oh, this old thing," she said, not looking up from her laptop. "Yeah, just a little something for myself." I saw the receipt peeking out of the dust bag later that night. A little something that cost $800. I made a mental note to check our joint account, but I never did. I didn't want the fight. I didn't want to hear how I should be happy for her, how I was being cheap, how she deserved nice things. The guilt trip was her superpower. A week later, it was shoes. Red sold things that made her an inch taller, and our bank account, I presumed, significantly smaller. "Big bonus at work," she announced when I stared at them. We landed the Miller account. My boss is thrilled. She worked in marketing. I knew she was good at her job, but I didn't think she was Louboutin bonus good. Still, I nodded. "That's great, honey. You deserve it." What else was I supposed to say? Accuse her of lying. But then the trickle became a flood. Our closet, once a shared space of my hoodies and her department store dresses, started to look like a showroom. Racks of clothes with tags still on them. Brands I only knew from magazines my mom used to buy. Her side of the closet was a Gucci, Prada, Versace invasion. My stuff was getting squeezed into a corner like a refugee camp for sensible cotton blends. One evening, she came out of the bathroom wearing a silk dress that shimmered under the lights. It clung to her in a way that should have made me feel something other than dread. "Wow," I said, trying to sound impressed. "New dress?" "It's for the company gala next month. Mark, my boss, said we all need to look the part. He's giving us a generous wardrobe allowance." "A wardrobe allowance? For everyone?" "Well, for the senior team. You know. Incentives." Incentives. That word started popping up a lot. Everything was an incentive. The expensive dinners she started going to after work, the spa days, the weekend team building trip to a Napa vineyard I wasn't invited to. It was all just part of her amazing new promotion. A promotion that, as far as I could tell, didn't come with a new title or a press release, just a fire hose of cash. I felt a knot of suspicion tightening in my gut, but I kept swallowing it down. I was the bad guy if I questioned it. I was the one holding her back, the anchor tied to her rising star. So I played dumb. I complimented the dresses. I told her she looked beautiful. And I started sleeping a little worse each night. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with a hunt for a piece of paper. We were refinancing the house, and the bank needed a copy of our original mortgage agreement. I remembered stashing it in a file box in our walk-in closet. I pushed past the wall of new silk and cashmere, the air thick, with the smell of expensive perfume and new leather. The box was tucked away on the top shelf behind a stack of hat boxes I had never seen before. As I pulled it down, one of the hat boxes tipped over. It wasn't hats that spilled out. It was a pile of receipts, a few jewelry boxes, and a single, crisp white envelope. It didn't have a logo. Just her name, Anna Miller, printed on the front. It felt heavy. I knew I shouldn't open it. It felt like stepping off a cliff. But I was already falling. I tore it open. It was a bank statement. Not from our bank, but from some online-only outfit called Apex Financial. My eyes scanned the page, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. Direct deposit $2, $450. Direct deposit $3, $100. Direct deposit $1, $900. Direct deposit $2, $600. 4 deposits in 1 month. All from her company's payroll department. They were all coded differently: expense reimbursement, performance bonus, project stipend, but they added up to just over $10,000 in 1 month. Her take-home pay, the one that went into our joint account, was around $5. This was double. This was a secret. My hands started to shake. This wasn't a bonus. This wasn't a wardrobe allowance. This was a whole separate financial life. I folded the statement, my fingers creasing the paper with surgical precision, and slid it back into the envelope. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it: the file box, the hat boxes, the lie. That night I made spaghetti her favorite. We sat at the table, the silence punctuated by the clinking of our forks. She was scrolling through her phone, probably looking at another $5,000 watch. I needed to know. I needed to see her face when I asked. I took a sip of water, my throat suddenly dry. "Hey," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "I got an offer in the mail today for a high-yield savings account from a place called Apex Financial. Ever hear of them?" Her thumb stopped scrolling. Her head stayed down, but I saw the color drain from her face. It was like watching a light switch get flipped off. She took a slow, deliberate breath before looking up, forcing a little laugh that sounded like cracking glass. Apex No doesn't ring a bell. Probably just junk mail. She lied. She looked right at me and lied. And in that moment I knew. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was bad. Very bad. The spaghetti turned to ash in my mouth. The knot in my gut wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a cold, hard certainty. I excused myself from the table. I walked back into our closet, the smell of her new life choking me. I reached up, pulled down the hat box, and took out the envelope. The numbers on the page seemed to glow in the dim light. They weren't just numbers, they were a story, and I was going to get to the end of it. I stood there for a minute, the paper trembling in my hand. I could hear her in the kitchen, humming a little tune as she cleared the plates, pretending everything was normal. But it wasn't. And it would never be normal again. I walked out of the closet, the statement held tight in my fist, my shadow stretching long down the hallway ahead of me. She was standing at the sink, her back to me. I took a deep breath. The quiet was about to end. I didn't say her name. I just let the silence hang in the air until she felt it. She turned from the sink, a dish rag in her hand, a fake smile already forming on her lips. It died when she saw the paper in my fist. "What's that?" she asked, her voice a little too high. I unfolded the statement and held it up. "Apex Financial," I said. "You told me you'd never heard of them." Her eyes darted from the paper to my face and back again. The color that had drained from her face at the dinner table was gone for good. She looked translucent under the kitchen lights. "Ray, it's not what you think." "Then what is it, Anna? Because it looks like 10 grand in secret off-the-books payments from your company in a single month." "Explain it to me." She leaned back against the counter, her knuckles white. It's complicated. Mark set it up. It's a bonus structure for tax purposes. To help us out. Help us out, or help you buy half of Rodeo Drive. This isn't a bonus. This is stealing. The word hung there, ugly and sharp. She flinched. It's not stealing, it's creative accounting. The company writes it off. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt, I laughed, a harsh grating sound. I get hurt, Anna. Your husband. The one who thought we were a team, who didn't know his wife was a common thief living a second life. Tears welled in her eyes. The guilt trip was warming up in the bullpen. I did it for us, Ray, so we could have nice things. So I wouldn't have to feel embarrassed when I'm out with Jessica. This has nothing to do with us. This is about you. You need to call Mark tomorrow, quit your job, and we're going to figure out how to pay this money back. Her face hardened instantly. The tears vanished. No. What do you mean, no? I'm not quitting, she said, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. I won't. You can't make me. She pushed past me and went to the bedroom, slamming the door. The sound echoed the finality of her words. She wasn't just refusing. She was choosing. She was choosing the lie. I stood there for a long time before pulling out my laptop. Her boss, Mark, was easy to find. His Instagram was public. The profile picture was him on a boat grinning a gaudy gold watch on his wrist. I scrolled through his feed. A new Audi R8 posted 2 months ago. A trip to Dubai 6 weeks ago. A picture from last weekend of him and his wife at a charity gala, her neck dripping with diamonds. His lifestyle had upgraded right alongside Anna's. Partners. They were partners. And then I saw it. A video posted from the Napa team building trip. It was a group shot panning across smiling faces. There at the end of the table was Anna laughing. Mark's arm was draped casually over the back of her chair, his fingers just barely brushing her shoulder. It was nothing. And it was everything. I walked back to the bedroom and opened the door without knocking. She was sitting on the edge of the bed staring at the wall. You're having an affair with him. It wasn't a question. She didn't even try to deny it this time. She just crumpled her body, folding in on itself, as a sob tore out of her throat. It's not that simple, she choked out between gasps. It's the simplest thing in the world, Anna. The money, the lies, it all makes sense now. How long? A few months, she whispered. After the scheme started, it just happened. In the blackmail. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock and fear. What? He's got something on you, doesn't he? That's why you won't quit. That's why you looked at me with pure terror when I suggested it. He's blackmailing you. The dam broke. The whole story came flooding out in a torrent of shame and regret. It started with the money, then the affair. One night in a hotel on a business trip, Mark had set up his phone. He had a video. He told her it was their little secret, their insurance policy, to make sure they were both loyal to the plan. But when she tried to cool things off, he'd made it clear it wasn't insurance. It was a leash. He said he'd send it to you, she cried. And to his wife? He'd ruined me. He'd ruin everything. I felt nothing. The sadness, the betrayal. It was all burned away by a cold, white-hot rage. The woman crying in front of me was a stranger. She had destroyed our marriage, our life for handbags and a cheap affair. Show me, I said, my voice flat. What? The video. I want to see it. And all the texts. The emails. Everything you have that proves the fraud, now. She shook her head, terrified. Ray, please. You don't have a choice anymore, Anna. You either give it to me, or I walk out that door right now and you can deal with Mark and the fallout all by yourself. You owe me this. Numbly, she handed me her phone. I watched her fingers tremble as she navigated to a hidden folder. It was all there. Screenshots of bank transfers, emails from Mark detailing how to code the payments, and a thread of sickening text messages. And the video, I didn't watch it. I just saw the thumbnail. That was enough. I forwarded everything to my own phone and then to a new anonymous email address I created on the spot. I attached all the files, the video, the screenshots, the emails to HR director's email, Mark's wife's email. Subject: evidence of fraud and adultery at your company. The body of the email was simple. Asterisk, attached, is evidence of a systematic embezzlement scheme orchestrated by Mark Stanton, along with proof of his affair with his employee Anna Miller, whom he is blackmailing. Do with this what you will. Asterisk. I hit send. Anna watched me, her face ashen. The click of the mouse was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a bomb detonating. The fallout was swift and brutal. I got a call the next morning from a hysterical Anna. HR had called her into a meeting. Mark was suspended pending a full investigation. By the end of the day, his wife had filed for an emergency protective order and started divorce proceedings. Within a week, Anna was fired, and the word was out. She was radioactive, blacklisted from every marketing firm in the city. She came to the house to pack her things, avoiding my eyes. She was a ghost, haunting the ruins of our life. I have nothing left, she said quietly, folding a silk dress into a suitcase. You have what you chose, I replied, standing in the doorway. I'd already spoken to a lawyer. He'd drawn up the divorce papers. They were sitting on the kitchen counter. I want you to sign these, I said. No alimony, no fight over the house. We split the savings and we walk away. She looked up, a flicker of her old defiance in her eyes. Maybe I don't want to. I just held up my phone, the screen dark. I still have a copy of everything, Anna. Sign the papers, or I can make sure every future employer, every new friend, every person you ever meet gets a chance to see the real you. Your call. The fight went out of her. She walked to the counter and signed her name, her signature, a shaky broken line. She was gone an hour later. The house was quiet, but the closet still smelled of her perfume. I spent the next week packing every trace of her into garbage bags, the clothes, the shoes, the bags she'd sold her soul for. That Friday, I had my first appointment with a therapist. I sat on a couch that wasn't mine and looked at a man I didn't know. So he said gently, "Where do we begin?" I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was being crushed by the weight of the last year. It all started, I said, with a wedding.
Story 7.
My dad died when I was 7. I remember the smell of his flannel jacket, a mix of sawdust and Old Spice. I remember the scratchy feel of his beard against my cheek. I remember him teaching me how to skip stones across Miller's Pond, his deep laugh echoing over the water when my rock finally bounced more than twice. Then he was gone. A year later, Mark moved in. 2 years after that, my mom married him. 3 years after that, my half-sister Leah was born. That's when the great erasure began. It started subtly. A photo of my dad on the mantelpiece was replaced with a wedding picture of Mom and Mark. Then another family portrait, this one with a baby Leah, took the place of a picture of Dad and me at the zoo. Soon the only photo of him left in the whole house was a small framed 2x3 I kept hidden in my nightstand drawer. For years, Mark has been on a relentless campaign to become my real dad. He tried to adopt me when I was 12. I fought it. He tried to get me to change my last name to his. I refused. My mom just went along with it, sighing and telling me I was making things difficult. Her biggest complicity, though, is the lie she tells my sister. Leah is 10 now, and she has been raised to believe we are full-blooded sisters. That Mark is my father, too. Pam Leah piped up from across the dinner table, pushing a green bean around her plate with her fork. "Can I ask something?" "Shoot," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Why do you call Dad Mark?" I froze my fork halfway to my mouth. I could feel 2 pairs of eyes lock onto me. My mom's were a warning. Mark's were a challenge. "We've talked about this, sweetie," my mom said, her voice a little too bright. "It's just a silly habit Pamela has. From when she was little." Leah's brow furrowed. "She's smart, too smart for these flimsy excuses. But it's weird. Nobody else calls their dad by their first name. Mark cleared his throat and put on his best benevolent father smile. It never reached his eyes. It's okay, Leah. It doesn't bother me. As long as your sister knows who her family is. He looked directly at me when he said it. The message was clear. I just stared down at my mashed potatoes, my appetite gone. I'm not hungry, I mumbled, pushing my chair back. Pamela, sit down and finish your dinner, my mom commanded her, tone sharp. I have homework. I didn't wait for a reply. I just walked out of the dining room, the weight of their silence pressing on my back. Later that night, I found my mom in the kitchen, wiping down the already spotless counters. We have to tell her, I said, my voice low. She didn't turn around. Tell her what? That you're determined to create drama where there is none. Mom, she's 10. She's asking questions. These silly habit excuses aren't going to work forever. She deserves to know the truth. She finally turned her face set in a hard mask of frustration. The truth. The truth is that Mark has raised you. He has paid for your clothes, your food, your school trips. He's been here for every parent-teacher conference and every scraped knee. Your father is gone. Mark is here. That doesn't make him my dad. My voice was rising and I fought to keep it down. And it doesn't give you the right to lie to Leah. You're lying about me. You're lying about my dad. Oh, stop it, she snapped, throwing the dishcloth into the sink. It's a harmless omission to protect a child's feelings. And frankly, it protects Mark's feelings too. He loves you like his own, and all you do is throw it back in his face. Protecting his feelings. Mom, he's trying to erase Dad. And you're helping him. That is childish nonsense, she said, her voice dripping with dismissal. You're clinging to the past. It's not healthy. Now, I don't want to hear another word about this. The subject is closed. The next week was Mark's birthday. As I was heading out the door for school, he stopped me in the hall. Big plans for your old man's birthday dinner tonight, he asked, grinning. I clutched my backpack straps. I have a study group. His smile faltered. On my birthday, can't you skip it? It's for a midterm. He sighed, a big theatrical sound. Pamela, I just want us to be a family. A real family. He held out a thick envelope. Speaking of which, I was hoping you'd look this over. It's just some forms. I took it hesitantly. Inside were official-looking documents. My eyes scanned the top page. Petition for adult adoption. My blood ran cold. What is this? I whispered, my voice shaking. I know you fought it when you were a kid, he said, his voice dropping into a persuasive, gentle tone. But you're almost 18. It would be your choice. It would just make everything simpler. We'd all have the same last name. One family. I stared at him at the hopeful, needy look on his face. He wasn't just offering, he was pleading. He wanted to own my past, to stamp his name over my father's, to finalize the erasure. No, I said, shoving the envelope back into his chest. The answer is still no. It will always be no. I turned and walked out the front door without looking back. The pressure didn't stop. It got worse. Every conversation felt like a trap. Every family activity was a test of my loyalty. Leah's questions became more frequent, more pointed. She asked why I didn't have any baby pictures with Mark. She asked why my last name was different on my school ID. Each time my mom or Mark would swoop in with a new, increasingly ridiculous lie. I felt like I was suffocating. The lie was a poison and it was infecting everything. It was twisting my relationship with my sister and turning my own home into a battleground. Last night was the final straw. We were watching a movie, and the dad in the film was teaching his daughter how to drive. Leah looked over at me from her spot on the floor. Is Mark going to teach you to drive? I guess I said, He's a good dad, she said matter-of-factly. Then she looked right at my mom. Is he Pamela's good dad too? The air went still. My mom's smile was brittle. Of course he is, baby. I saw the confusion on Leah's face, the little gears turning in her head as she tried to make the pieces fit. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be a part of it. I wouldn't let them use my sister to bludgeon me into submission. I waited until Leah was in bed. I found my mom and Mark in the living room watching TV as if nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway and switched it off. What the hell, Pamela, Mark said, startled. I looked from him to my mom, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my voice was cold and steady. I'm done. I'm done with the lies. I took a deep breath. I'm giving you one last chance. You are going to tell Leah the truth. If you don't tell her by tomorrow night, I will. My mom's face went white with fury. Mark stood up slowly, his expression hardening into something ugly. You will do no such thing, he said, his voice a low growl. This is my house. She is my daughter, and I am your father. You are not my father, I shot back, my voice trembling with the force of years of swallowed anger. And you will not use your daughter to lie about mine anymore. Tomorrow. That's the deadline. The next day was a tomb. No one spoke to me. At breakfast, my mom and Mark communicated with looks and pointed gestures, acting as if I were a ghost at the table. They thought their silence would break me. They were wrong. It just solidified my resolve. That afternoon, I found Leah in her room drawing a family of unicorns in a rainbow notebook. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently and closed it behind me, the click of the latch sounding like a gunshot in a quiet house. Leah looked up, her blue eyes wide. Are you in trouble? She whispered. I sat on the edge of her bed, my hands trembling in my lap. Can I show you something? She nodded, putting her purple crayon down. I pulled the small framed photo from my pocket. The one I kept hidden in my nightstand. It was creased around the edges from years of being handled. I held it out to her. In the picture, a man with a kind smile and a scratchy-looking beard was holding a much smaller version of me on his shoulders. We were both laughing. Leah took it carefully. Who's this? My throat felt tight. That's my dad. I took a breath. My first dad. His name was Daniel. Her brow furrowed. She looked from the picture to my face, then back to the picture. The pieces were clicking into place behind her eyes faster than I ever could have hoped. He died, I said softly. A long time ago. Before you were born. Mom married Mark after... So... Mark is my dad, she said, her voice a small, curious thing, but he's not your dad. He's my stepdad, I confirmed, a wave of relief washing over me. It was that simple. It was always that simple. Oh. She looked at the picture again, tracing my dad's face with her little finger. That's why you call him Mark. She looked up at me and there was no confusion in her eyes, only a startling clarity. I would call him Mark too. If he wasn't my real dad. She handed the photo back to me. I'm sorry, he died. My eyes burned with tears. Me too. The door flew open, crashing against the wall. My mother stood there, her face a mask of white-hot fury. Mark was right behind her, his big frame filling the doorway. What have you done? My mom hissed, her voice shaking. She lunged forward and snatched Leah by the arm. Go to your room. Right now. This is my room, Leah said, confused and scared. Go downstairs, Mark boomed. Watch TV. Leah scrambled off the bed and ran out of the room, casting a frightened look back at me. As soon as she was gone, my mom turned on me. How dare you, she seethed. How dare you go behind our backs and poison your sister's mind with your selfish, pathetic stories? It's not a story, it's the truth. I stood up, my own anger surging to meet hers. Something you should have told her years ago. You are grounded, Mark said, stepping forward. His voice was low and menacing. 3 weeks. No phone, no computer except for schoolwork, and you are not to leave this house. Do you understand me? I just stared at him, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a response. I asked you a question, he yelled, taking another step closer. She understands, my mom snapped, grabbing his arm. Just leave her. It's not worth it. They left, slamming my door so hard a poster fell off the wall. I sank onto my bed, clutching the photo of my dad to my chest, the sound of my own heart roaring in my ears. Later that evening, there was a knock on my door. It opened before I could answer. Mark came in and shut it behind him. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked wounded. It was his most dangerous look. I don't get it, Pam, he said, sitting on the end of my bed. I instinctively pulled my legs away. I really don't. For 10 years, I have been here. Every single day. I taught you how to ride a bike. I helped you with your science fair projects. I paid for your braces. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading. He's a ghost. A memory. I'm the one who's here. I'm the one who loves you, who provides for you. I'm the one who's going to walk you down the aisle at your wedding. He took a breath, his voice thick with emotion. That makes me your real dad. I stared at him, at this man who had tried for a decade to systematically erase the most important person I had ever lost. All the anger, all the years of resentment coalesced into a single ice-cold point of clarity. No, I said, my voice flat and empty of any heat. You are my mom's husband. You are Leah's father. To me, you are my stepdad. His face fell. And you will never be anything more, I finished. That word step will always be there. Always. He stood up without another word and walked out, closing the door quietly behind him. The quiet was worse than the slamming. The following days were a new kind of hell. The house was thick with a tense, suffocating silence. But the war wasn't over. It had just changed tactics. They turned their attention to Leah. I'd hear them at the dinner table, their voices syrupy sweet. Leah, honey, you know Mark is Pamela's dad too, right? He takes care of her just like he takes care of you. I saw Leah shrink in her chair. But, Pamela said. Pamela's confused, my mom would cut in smoothly. She's being a difficult teenager. We're one family. And Mark is the dad of this family. Pamela's dad and your dad. Yesterday, I heard Leah start to cry. I was in my room, door closed, but I heard her small, hiccuping sobs from the kitchen. I don't understand, she wailed. You're lying. Leah, do not use that tone with me, Mark's voice replied, tight with frustration. We are telling you the truth. Now say it. Mark is Pamela's dad. No, she cried, and I heard her little feet running down the hall to her room, her door slamming shut. A wave of nausea and guilt so strong it buckled my knees, washed over me. I had wanted to give her the truth. Instead, I'd thrown her into the trenches with me. I had made my 10-year-old sister a soldier in a war she never should have had to fight. That night, my mom came to my room. She didn't knock. Are you happy now? She asked, her voice low and venomous. She stood by the door, arms crossed, her face a bitter caricature. I hope you're happy. I didn't say anything. She's a wreck, my mom continued, a cruel satisfaction in her tone. She's crying herself to sleep. She's confused and upset, and it is 100% your fault. This family was fine. We were happy. But you couldn't stand that, could you? You had to drag your father's ghost into everything and ruin it for the rest of us. She looked at me, her eyes cold and hard. You didn't just hurt Mark. You hurt your little sister. I hope you can live with that. She left, leaving the door wide open. I sat there in the silence, her words echoing in my head. I had thought telling the truth was an act of strength, a way to honor my dad. But looking at the wreckage around me, at Leah's tears, and the fractured state of my home, a sick, creeping doubt began to poison my resolve. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I had broken my family just to save a memory.
Story 8.
The knock on my apartment door wasn't a knock. It was a 3-thump combo, hard and impatient. I knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Only Gary knocked like he was trying to break the door down. I swung it open. What's up, man? And then I saw it. His head. Gary, who had this thick, almost ridiculously perfect brown hair, was completely bald. Shiny, freshly shaved, not a hint of stubble. Whoa, I said, leaning against the doorframe. Midlife crisis hit a decade early. He didn't smile. He just stared at me, his eyes intense. My Aunt Carol. She has cancer. Chemo starts next week. The joke died in my throat. Oh. Man, I'm sorry. Seriously? Yeah, he said, stepping past me into my apartment like he owned the place. He was holding a gym bag. So I did this. Solidarity, you know. He rubbed his hand over his scalp. She's gonna lose hers, so I lost mine first. That's a hell of a thing to do, Gary. She'll appreciate that. He dropped the bag on my coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. He unzipped it and pulled out a set of electric clippers, the cord wrapped neatly around the body. Your turn. I blinked. My what? Your turn, he repeated, unwinding the cord and looking for an outlet. We're doing this. Solidarity. I took a step back. Whoa, hold on. We. Mark's already on board. He's doing it tomorrow. I came here first. You're my best friend. He plugged the clippers into the wall socket by my TV. He flicked them on. The loud bzzzzzzzzz filled the room, a hostile, invasive sound. He flicked them off. Sit. He pointed at a kitchen chair. I held my hands up. Gary, no. I'm not doing that. His face, which had been set in this grim, determined mask, tightened. What do you mean, no? I mean, no, I'm not shaving my head. I'm sorry about your aunt. I really am. I'll send flowers, I'll sign a card, whatever you need, but I'm not buzzing my hair off. Why not? He demanded, his voice getting louder. It's just hair, Brody. It grows back. It's about the gesture. I get the gesture, I said, trying to keep my own voice level. It's a great gesture for times you times to do. She's your aunt. I've never even met her. That doesn't matter, he snapped, taking a step toward me. It's about supporting me, supporting my family. And I do support you. But I like my hair, man. It took me forever to grow it out. I'm not shaving it off. The look he gave me was pure venom. He couldn't seem to process the word no. It just wasn't in his vocabulary when it came from someone else. You like your times, hair times, he said, his voice dripping with condescending disbelief. My aunt is fighting for her life, and you're worried about your stupid hair. This isn't about your aunt anymore, is it? This is about you not getting your way. Unbelievable, he scoffed, shaking his head. I came to you, my best friend, for a simple show of support, and you're too vain and selfish to do it. It's a goddamn haircut. It's my haircut. On my head, I get to decide what happens to it. "You're a real piece of work," he said, yanking the plug from the wall so hard I thought it would rip out of the socket. He started shoving the clippers back into his bag, his movements jerky and violent. A real a-hole. For not wanting to shave my head. Get over yourself, Gary. He zipped the bag shut and slung it over his shoulder. Don't bother sending a card, he spat, turning for the door. My family doesn't need fake support from selfish pricks. He slammed the door behind him. The whole building probably felt it. I just stood there in the middle of my living room, the phantom buzzing of the clippers still ringing in my ears. A week later, I was trying to wash the whole thing down with cheap beer. Mark's party was in full swing, the bass from the speakers vibrating through the floorboards. I'd been avoiding Gary, and he'd been avoiding me. The tension had seeped into our whole friend group, forcing everyone to pick a side in a fight that was utterly insane. Mark, for the record, had not shaved his head. He told Gary it was a family thing and he'd feel weird intruding. Gary hadn't spoken to him since. Tonight, Gary wasn't here. It was a relief. It meant I could actually relax. And I did. Maybe a little too much. I did a round of shots with some guys from work, played a few disastrous games of beer pong, and then found a corner of the kitchen to just lean and drink. Easy there, killer, Mark said, appearing next to me and grabbing the beer I was about to open. That's your fifth in an hour. You're done. I'm fine, I slurred, reaching for it. The room was starting to tilt. Yeah, you're real fine, he said, holding the beer out of my reach. Look, you're not driving home like this. The spare room upstairs is all yours. Crash here. Don't want to be a burden, I mumbled. The only burden you'll be is when I have to carry your drunk ass up the stairs. Let's go. He put an arm around my shoulder and steered me through the crowd. The music felt like it was drilling into my skull. He got me to the room, a small space with a single bed and a desk. It was quiet. Blissfully quiet. Keys, he said, holding out his hand. I fumbled in my pocket and dropped them into his palm. All right. Sleep it off, man. See you in the morning. He closed the door behind him, leaving me in the dim light filtering in from the street. I didn't even bother taking my shoes off. I just fell face first onto the mattress. The world spun for a second, and then like a switch being flipped. It went black. I came to in pieces. Not all at once, but in slow, confusing waves. First there was a sound. A low, persistent buzzing right next to my ear. Then a feeling. A vibration against my skull. And a coldness. A weird draft on my head where there should have been warmth. My body felt like it was filled with sand, heavy and useless. I tried to lift my head, but it was too much effort. Something was tickling my cheek. I managed to crack an eye open. The room was dark, but a sliver of light from the hallway cut across the pillow. And on the pillow I saw them. Clumps of my own dark hair. Thick locks scattered like dead leaves. A cold dread, sharper than any hangover, sliced through the alcoholic fog. I forced my arm to move, my hand clumsy and slow. I raised it to my head. Instead of hair, my fingers met the unfamiliar bristly sandpaper of a fresh buzz cut. My other eye opened. My face felt strange. Lighter. I brought my hand down and brushed my fingers over my right eye. Nothing. My eyebrow was gone. My stomach plummeted. The buzzing stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself up on my elbows and looked toward the foot of the bed. A figure was standing there, a dark silhouette against the hallway light. He was holding the electric clippers, the metal head glinting. As my eyes adjusted, I saw his face. It was Gary. And he was smiling. A wide, proud, utterly insane smile. See, he said, his voice calm and triumphant. Now we're in this together. Solidarity. The world snapped into focus with a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. It burned away the hangover, the exhaustion, everything. I launched myself off the bed, a raw sound tearing from my throat, and slammed him against the wall. The clippers flew from his hand and clattered to the floor. "What the fuck did you do to me?" I screamed, my face inches from his. He didn't even flinch. He just kept that serene, self-satisfied smile. "I did what you were too chicken shit to do yourself, Brody. I made you a better friend. You assaulted me in my sleep." I shoved him again, his head thudding against the drywall. "It's just hair," he yelled back, his composure finally cracking. "My aunt is dying and you were whining about your stupid hair. I fixed it for you." The door flew open. Mark stood there. His face, a mask of confusion, then horror. As he took in the scene, me shirtless and shaking with a half-shaved head and one missing eyebrow, the clumps of hair on the pillow, and Gary pinned against the wall looking like a deranged cult leader. "What the hell is going on?" Mark stammered. I let go of Gary and pointed a trembling finger at him. "He did this. While I was passed out." I turned to Mark, my voice breaking. "Call the cops!" Gary actually laughed. A short, incredulous bark. "The cops? For a haircut? Are you insane?" "Call them," I repeated to Mark, my eyes never leaving Gary's. Mark pulled out his phone and backed out of the room. I could hear his hushed, urgent voice in the hallway. Gary just shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face, as if Times was the one who had betrayed Times him, asterisk. "You're going to throw away our friendship over this?" he asked softly. "You're really going to bring the police into this?" "You threw away our friendship when you came into this room with a pair of clippers," I snarled. "You're not my friend. You're a psycho." The police arrived in less than 10 minutes. They separated us, took my statement, and looked at my head with a mixture of pity and disbelief. They found the clippers on the floor. Gary, with a calmness that chilled me to the bone, admitted everything. He told them he was just helping a friend see the bigger picture. They put him in handcuffs. The click of the metal snapping shut was one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. As they led him away, he looked back at me, his eyes full of righteous fury. "You'll regret this, Brody. I was trying to help you." The regret never came. But the harassment did. It started with phone calls from a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice, shrill and accusing. "You need to drop these charges. My son is a good boy. You're ruining his life." It was Gary's mother. I hung up. She called back. I blocked the number. The next day, the text started from a different number. Pictures of Gary as a kid. Messages about how he was just trying to support his family, how I was a selfish, vindictive monster. Then a week after the assault, my doorbell buzzed insistently. I checked the peephole. It was her. Gary's mom, a thin woman with a pinched face and the same entitled fire in her eyes as her son. I didn't answer. She started banging on the door. "I know you're in there, Brody, you coward. Face me." I ignored her. Eventually, she left. The next day, I installed a small security camera over my door. It felt paranoid, but I had a feeling this wasn't over. I was right. She came back 2 days later. This time, she didn't buzz. She just waited. When I opened the door to leave for work, she was standing there practically vibrating with rage. "We need to talk," she hissed. "No, we don't." "Get off my property or I'm calling the police," I said, trying to close the door. She jammed her foot in the way. "You will not ruin my son. He was being a good friend. You're the selfish one." "He assaulted me," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Now move your foot." That's when she snapped. She lunged her purse, swinging like a medieval flail. It caught me square in the temple, the hard corner of a wallet or phone inside connecting with a sickening thud. Stars exploded behind my eyes. and I stumbled back into my apartment. She came after me, her nails raking down my cheek, drawing blood. "You'll drop the charges," she shrieked. "You'll tell them it was a misunderstanding." Adrenaline kicked in. I grabbed her wrists and shoved her back hard out into the hallway. "Get the hell away from me," I roared, slamming the door and locking it. My head was throbbing and I could feel warm blood trickling down my face. My hands were shaking. I leaned against the door for a moment, then walked over to my phone, opened the security app, and watched the recording. It was all there. Crystal clear video and audio of her ambush, the attack, the whole unhinged tirade. I smiled, tasting blood. Then I dialed 911 again. The legal system grinds slowly, but it grinds fine. Gary's case was first. Faced with undeniable evidence in his own bizarre confession, he pleaded guilty to assault to avoid a worse sentence. The judge read him the riot act about consent and bodily autonomy. He got 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a mandatory anger management course. The entire friend group cut him off completely. Last I heard, his parents sent him to live with some other relatives in another state, a fresh start he in no way deserved. His mother's case was more spectacular. My video was the star witness. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a distraught mother. Pushed to the edge, but the jury saw a violent, entitled woman attacking someone for daring to hold her son accountable. She was found guilty of assault and battery. She got 30 days in county jail, 2 years of probation after that, and was ordered to pay for my medical bills from the emergency room visit. But I wasn't done. I filed a civil suit against her. For the assault, the harassment, the emotional distress. My lawyer said we had a slam dunk case, and he was right. She settled out of court. The check that arrived a few weeks later was for $10,000. I held it in my hand, looking at the numbers. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about consequence. It was a tangible piece of justice. I used every penny of it for a down payment on a small house across town, far away from my old apartment and the ghosts of bad memories. I painted the walls, built a deck in the backyard, and watched my hair grow back slowly at first, then all at once. The missing eyebrow returned a little patchier than before, but it was mine. About a year later, I was at a hardware store trying to figure out which lawnmower to buy when a woman tapped me on the shoulder. "You look like you have no idea what you're doing," she said with a laugh. I turned. "Is it that obvious?" "Completely," she said, her smile lighting up her whole face. "I'm Sarah. My dad owned a landscaping business. Let me save you from that piece of junk." We talked for an hour. She helped me pick a mower, we got coffee, and by the time I left, I had her number. Life moves on. The hair grows back. And sometimes you find out that the best thing a toxic friend can do is show you exactly who they are. So you have every reason to slam the door shut and never look back.
Story 9.
15 years. That's how long we'd been married. 15 years, 2 daughters, a mortgage, and what I thought was a pretty damn good life. Amy and I were the couple our friends looked up to. The ones who still held hands, who still laughed at each other's stupid jokes. We were solid. Unshakable. Or so I thought. It was a Friday night. Another lockdown special, which meant a virtual get-together with our college friends, beamed onto our 6.5-inch smart TV. The girls, Chloe and Maya, had made a brief appearance to wave at their aunties and uncles, before retreating upstairs to their own digital worlds. Now it was just us, the adults, shouting over each other from our respective living rooms. Wine was flowing. Amy, curled up next to me on the couch, was on her 3rd glass of rosé, her cheeks flushed, and her laughter a little too loud. I was nursing a whiskey, enjoying the easy comfort of it all. The whole setup was running off Amy's phone, which she'd connected to the Chromecast. It was easier than trying to get the laptop to play nice with the TV. "John, you're quiet tonight." Sarah's face, pixelated and slightly distorted, filled the screen. Just admiring my beautiful wife, I said, slinging an arm around Amy. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. It was true. Even after all this time, she could still take my breath away. The call dragged on for another hour. By the end, Amy was dead to the world, her soft snores a gentle counterpoint to the boisterous goodbyes. All right, guys, we're out, I announced, giving a final wave. Amy's tapped out? A chorus of goodnights echoed through the speakers before the host finally ended the call. The screen went black for a second and I reached for the remote to switch to Netflix. But before I could, the screen flickered back to life. It was still mirroring Amy's phone. Her WhatsApp was open. I didn't think anything of it. I was about to disconnect it when a new message popped up at the top of the screen. Asterisk, asterisk, lifeline. You still up, beautiful. Missing you. Asterisk, asterisk. My brow furrowed. Lifeline. I'd never seen that contact before. A new best friend I hadn't heard about. The heart emoji felt intimate. I leaned in closer, my buzz from the whiskey sharpening into a nervous edge. Amy stirred beside me, her phone still lying face up on the couch cushion between us. The screen was unlocked. Another message from Lifeline appeared. Asterisk, asterisk, Lifeline. He must be asleep by now. God, I wish I was there instead of him. Asterisk, asterisk. My blood went cold. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. Asterisk. He times who the hell was times? He times who was this person? To know our evening routine, I looked at the chat list. A dozen conversations with friends, family, her mom group. But there at the top pinned was Lifeline. The last message from Amy's side read, Times, party's still going. He's getting drunk. Wish you were here to rescue me. Asterisk. My stomach turned. Rescue her. From what? From our life? My hand trembled as I picked up the TV remote. My thumb hovered over the directional pad. I didn't want to know. I swear to God, I wanted to turn the TV off and pretend I never saw it. But I couldn't. I pressed the down arrow. The screen scrolled. I started reading. The conversation was a dizzying mix of mundane details and raw, explicit intimacy. They talked about their day, what they had for lunch, and then in the same breath, what they wanted to do to each other. There were pictures. A lot of pictures. Selfies she'd sent from our bathroom, our bed. Places I thought were ours. There were pictures he'd sent back. I kept scrolling. Down, down, down into the abyss of my wife's secret life. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The dates on the messages blurred together. 2020. 2019. 2018. It just kept going. Then I saw his name. Matt. The world tilted on its axis. Matt. Her childhood friend. The guy I'd known for 15 years. The guy who came over for barbecues, who the girls called Uncle Matt. The guy Amy had always described as her gay best friend. Oh, Matt's not interested in women, she told me years ago, laughing it off when I'd asked if there was anything between them. He's been my rock since we were kids, that's all. He's family. A lazy bum, she'd called him. A lovable screw-up who could never hold down a real job. I'd felt sorry for him. I'd even helped him out with a loan once, which he never paid back. The chats laid it all bare. They mocked my work ethic, my taste in movies, my performance in bed. They dissected every argument Amy and I ever had with Matt, always taking her side, telling her she deserved better. They had pet names. They had a history that predated me by a decade. They had a future they were planning one that didn't include me. My entire marriage, our entire life together, replayed in my mind, but now it was a horror film. Every business trip I took, every late night she'd said she was out with her girlfriends, every time she'd been texting Matt about his problems, it was all a lie. I wasn't her husband. I was the placeholder. The stable, reliable provider. The chump. I scrolled back years. all the way to the beginning of the chat history she'd saved. 15 years. It had been going on for 15 years. Our whole marriage. He was her lifeline because I was her prison. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold, hard rage that settled deep in my bones. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a drunken fling. This was a calculated long-term deception. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had built our entire life on a foundation of lies. Our home, our children, my children. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to grip the edge of the couch. Were they even mine? The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I looked at Amy, sleeping so peacefully beside me, a slight serene smile on her lips, as if she were having a pleasant dream. The sight of her made my skin crawl. She was a stranger. A monster disguised as the woman I loved. I couldn't wake her. Not like this. Not fueled by whiskey and a rage so pure it felt like it could burn the house down. I needed proof. I needed something concrete, something she couldn't deny or wriggle her way out of. With tears and excuses. My own phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hand steady now with a grim sense of purpose. I aimed the camera at the TV. Click. The first photo captured a screen of her telling him she loved him. That he was her soulmate. Click. The next was a nude she'd sent him just last week, taken while I was in the shower down the hall. Click. 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 I photographed everything. The promises. The explicit details. The way they laughed about me being completely oblivious. Page after page of our life being torn to shreds. Preserved in crystal clear 4K on a 6.5-inch screen. I documented years of betrayal in under 5 minutes. When I was done, I lowered my phone and just sat there in the dark, the TV's glow casting long shadows across the room. I stared at the screen at their intertwined lives displayed for me to see. Beside me, Amy sighed in her sleep and shifted her hand, falling onto my leg. A casual, possessive touch. The touch of a wife. I flinched like I'd been burned. Her eyelids began to flutter. The first thing she saw when her eyes cracked open was the television. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, followed by a tidal wave of pure animal panic. She shot upright, snatching her phone from the cushion. With a frantic swipe, the screen mirroring her betrayal vanished, replaced by the sterile logo of the Chromecast. She turned to me, her face pale, her eyes wide and searching. Did you? I just stared at her, the whiskey and the rage, forming a thick sludge in my throat. I couldn't speak. I just gave a slow, deliberate nod. Her breath hitched. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just stared back, cornered. The silence in the room was louder than any argument we'd ever had. "John," she finally whispered. "You're drunk. We'll talk in the morning." She got up and walked out of the room. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the click of our bedroom door shutting. Our bedroom. I slept on the couch. The next morning, she came downstairs dressed for a normal Saturday. She poured a coffee, her movements breezy as if nothing had happened. "Morning," she said, her voice bright and utterly false. "About last night. You saw some silly messages. It was just flirting, John. Harmless fun. All my friends do it. It's healthy." Healthy. The word came out like a shard of glass. I stood up from the kitchen table, my own phone in my hand. "You call this healthy?" I turned the screen toward her. The first photo I'd taken was displayed in perfect clarity, her, naked on our bed, with the caption asterisk, "Thinking of you. He's at the grocery store." Asterisk. The color drained from her face. Her coffee cup trembled in her hand. "I read it all, Amy," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. 15 years of healthy flirting. I read about how you pitied me, how you mocked me with him, how you wished every night that he was in our bed instead of me. John, please. The facade crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. Don't. Don't you dare cry. Just tell me why. She finally broke. A raw, ugly sob escaped her. Because I loved him, she screamed, slamming the mug on the counter so hard it cracked. I've always loved him. We were together since high school, don't you get it? Then why marry me? Because he was a lazy bum. The confession was venomous. He had no ambition, no future. I loved him, but I wanted this house. I wanted the kids to have a good life. I wanted security. And you were safe. You were the smart, stable choice. The words hit me harder than a fist. I wasn't her husband. I was her 401k. The girls, I choked out the question I dreaded most clawing its way up my throat. Are they... They're yours, she said instantly, a flicker of something, maybe the only truth of the morning in her eyes. Of course they're yours. I wasn't stupid. I could never risk having his kids. I made sure of it. The calculation in that statement was the final nail in the coffin. We're done, I said. I want a divorce. I gave her a week. 1 week to tell Chloe and Maya the truth. Her truth. You broke this family, I told her, my voice cold and flat. You will be the one to explain why. If you don't, I will. On day 6, she sat them down on the couch. I stood by the doorway, my arms crossed, watching the performance. Girls, she began, her voice dripping with manufactured sadness. Daddy and I need to tell you something. Daddy got a big new job. In another country. He's going to be moving away for a while. I saw the confusion on my daughters' faces. Chloe, my sharp-eyed 12-year-old, narrowed her eyes. What are you talking about? Dad loves his job here. Maya, who was only 9 but saw everything, looked from her mother's tear-streaked face to my stone-cold expression. Are you getting divorced? She asked, her small voice cutting through the bullshit. She looked right at me. Dad, did you cheat on Mom? That was it. The snap. Amy turning me into the villain was a line I wouldn't let her cross. No, Maya. I didn't, I said, stepping into the room. I knelt in front of my daughters, forcing myself to meet their frightened eyes. Your mother has been lying to us. To all of us. For a very long time. She has been seeing someone else. Her friend Matt. The name hung in the air. Uncle Matt. The girls stared at Amy, their expressions shifting from confusion to a dawning, horrified understanding. Amy just sat there, mouth agape, her manipulative story in tatters. Get out your phones, I said to my daughters, my voice shaking with rage. Call Grandma and Grandpa, both sets. Tell them to come over right now. It's a family emergency. An hour later, our living room was a pressure cooker. My parents sat on one side, stiff and anxious. Amy's parents sat on the other, already looking at me with accusatory glares, no doubt fed a preemptive sob story by their daughter. Amy started in with the tears. John is trying to take the girls from me. He's making things up. Am I? I pulled out my phone and connected it to the Chromecast. Let's watch a movie. It's a tragedy about our marriage. I put the photos on the screen. The nudes. The messages mocking me. The plans they'd made. The lazy bum confession. I narrated the worst parts out loud, my voice ringing with a terrible vindicated clarity. I left nothing out. The room was utterly silent, broken only by Amy's strangled sobs and her mother's gasps of horror. When it was over, I turned off the TV. No one looked at me. All eyes were on Amy. Her own father stared at her, his face a mask of disgust. Is this true? She couldn't speak. She just nodded, her body racked with shame. Then Chloe stood up. She walked over to her mother, her young face set like granite. I want you to leave, she said, her voice clear and strong. Just leave our house. Maya stood beside her sister, a silent, unshakable wall. That night, my brother-in-law came and helped Amy pack a bag. She was out of the house before the sun came up. I filed for divorce the next day. She didn't fight me for custody of the girls. She knew she wouldn't win. She only asked for half the value of the house she'd bought with my money. Therapy started for me and the girls a week later. We were rebuilding piece by painful piece. 2 months into the separation, Amy's own sister called me furious. She and her husband had dropped by Amy's sad little apartment unannounced and found her in bed with Matt. The affair wasn't over. It had just gone public. The fallout was biblical. Amy's family, disgusted by her complete lack of remorse, turned their backs on her. Matt's parents, who were wealthy and had been funding his artistic lifestyle for 2 decades, finally cut him off for destroying my family. The last I heard, Amy was working as a cashier at a grocery store. Matt was bagging for her. They had their love, I guess. But they had nothing else. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if it was worth it for them. Then I look at Chloe and Maya sleeping peacefully in their beds, in a home that is finally safe, finally honest, and I know I have everything that ever truly mattered.
Story Teen.
The ceiling fan wobbled. 1, 2, 3 blades blurring into a wobbly circle of white. If I focused on it long enough, the slight nausea churning in my gut would almost feel like motion sickness. Almost normal. A knock on my bedroom door made me jump. Jackson, are you just going to lie in there all day? It was my mom. Her voice was already tight, stretched thin like a rubber band about to snap. It was only 11 a.m. I'm up, I called out, my own voice sounding rough. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and the room tilted violently. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of the mattress until the spinning slowed to a gentle sway. This was my life now. A constant low-grade vertigo that doctors shrugged at. Just tired, they'd say. My parents heard lazy. I grabbed my laptop from the floor, flipping it open. The screen glowed with the ghosts of my failures. Indeed.com, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, 57 applications sent, 57 little digital missiles launched into the void. I had a spreadsheet to track them. Most rows were blank. 4 had a red or rejected typed in. The rest were just nothing. Crickets. My bedroom door creaked open. Mom stood there, arms crossed, holding a laundry basket against her hip like a shield. I saw the trash cans are still by the garage, she said. Not a question. Sorry, I was going to get them. I just woke up and felt a little... Don't she cut me off. Don't start with a dizzy thing, Jackson. I'm not in the mood. I'm not making it up, I said, my voice rising. My heart started doing its usual trip hammer thing against my ribs. My head is pounding. Your head is pounding because you sleep until noon and stare at a screen all day, she said, her eyes scanning the clutter of my room. You're 18. I told you if you don't have a job by this month, you start paying rent. Well, it's this month. $300. Due on the 1st. I just stared at her. With what money? I'm trying. You see me on here every single day. I see you on there, she corrected. I don't see any results. A job at McDonald's isn't beneath you? A job stocking shelves isn't beneath you? You need to get over yourself and just do something. She left, pulling the door shut behind her with a little too much force. The click of the latch echoed in the silent room. Asterisk. $300. Asterisk. She might as well have asked for $1 million. I had $43 to my name, saved for my last birthday. My hands were shaking. I scrolled through my contacts and hesitated over my dad's name. Calling him was always a gamble. Since the divorce, and especially since he married Carol, our conversations had become minefields. But desperation was a powerful motivator. He answered on the third ring. "What's up?" "Hey, Dad. You got a minute?" "Making one. Carol and I are heading out to look at patio furniture." "What do you need?" The impatience was already there. "It's about Mom." I started trying to keep my voice steady. "She's saying I have to pay rent now, and I don't have it. I'm looking for jobs. I swear I've put in applications everywhere." "Your mother told me she was going to do that," he said, his tone flat. "It's about time, Jackson. You're an adult. You can't just live off her forever." In the background, I heard Carol's muffled voice. "Not our problem. It's not that I want to." I said, my throat tightening. "I told you I haven't been feeling well. It's hard to even get out of bed some days. I think I need to see another doctor." A heavy sigh crackled through the phone. "We've been through this. The doctor said you're fine. You have anxiety. You know what helps with anxiety? A routine, a purpose, a job. So that's it, you're just siding with her. This isn't about sides. This is about you growing up. Your mother and I are on the same page for once. You need a fire lit under you." A fire lit under me? I couldn't believe it. "I feel like crap all the time, and you think the problem is that I'm not motivated enough." "Watch your tone," he said sharply. "I've got to go. Get a job, Jackson. It's that simple." He hung up. I threw the phone onto my comforter. It bounced once and lay still. Asterisk. On the same page. Asterisk. The two people who were supposed to be in my corner had circled the wagons, and I was on the outside. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of anxiety. I filled out 3 more applications, the words on the screen swimming before my eyes. My head throbbed in time with my pulse. I skipped lunch. The thought of facing my mom in the kitchen was worse than the hunger. Around 5, I heard her car pull away. A brief reprieve. I walked out into the living room, blinking in the bright light. The house was quiet. A note was on the counter. Asterisk went to the store. Be back in an hour. The trash better? Be taken in. Asterisk. I grabbed my keys. My old 98 Camry was a piece of junk, but it was mine. I just needed to drive. Clear my head. I got in the car, the cracked leather seats hot from the sun. I put the key in the ignition, turned it, and was met with a series of pathetic clicks. Dead battery. Of course. I slumped back against the headrest, pressing the heels of my hands into my eyes. Everything was closing in. No job, no money, no energy, no escape. When Mom got home, the first thing she saw was me sitting at the kitchen table, head in my hands. The second thing she saw through the window were the trash cans still sitting defiantly at the curb. She dropped the grocery bags on the floor. Oranges and a carton of milk tumbled out and rolled across the linoleum. "You have got to be kidding me," she said, her voice dangerously low. "The car won't start," I said, looking up at her. I was going to try and jump it. "Oh, the car won't start," she mimicked, her voice dripping with scorn. "Is that the excuse of the day? Yesterday it was a headache. The day before you were dizzy." "I am so sick of the excuses, Jackson. It's one thing. One thing I asked you to do." "I'm not making excuses," I shot back, standing up. "My car is dead. My body feels like it's dead. I am trying." "No, you're not," she screamed, her face turning red. "You're not trying. You're waiting. You're waiting for someone to rescue you. For me to just let it go. For your father to swoop in and feel sorry for you. Well, I'm done waiting." She pulled out her phone, her thumb jabbing at the screen. I just talked to your father. We're in agreement. My stomach dropped. Agreement about what? She looked up from her phone, her eyes cold and empty of anything I recognized. You have 1 hour to pack a bag, she said. Get whatever you can fit in your car and get out. I stared, my mouth hanging open. What? You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go? My car doesn't even start. That sounds like a you problem, she said, turning her back on me to pick up the spilled milk. Your father's house isn't an option. He's done too. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my lungs. I fumbled for my own phone, my fingers like clumsy sausages. I scrolled to Dad's contact and typed, my hands trembling so bad I could barely hit the letters. Asterisk. Mom is kicking me out. Right now. She said I can't come to your place. Is this for real? Asterisk. I hit send. The 3 little dots appeared instantly, taunting me. I held my breath, watching, praying. A moment later, a single devastating text bubble popped up on my screen. The bubble solidified into a single brutal word. Yes. My phone slipped from my sweaty hand and clattered onto the linoleum. The sound was small, insignificant, in the suddenly cavernous kitchen. 1 word. He didn't even have the decency to type out a full sentence. My mom didn't look at me. She just kept putting her groceries away, her movements stiff and methodical. Cereal box. Can of beans. Carton of eggs. Life for her was continuing as normal. Your hour started when I got home, she said to the inside of the refrigerator. My legs felt like they were filled with wet cement. I managed to stumble back to my room. What do you pack when you're being exiled? I grabbed a duffel bag from the back of my closet and started stuffing it with clothes. T-shirts, jeans, socks. My laptop. Its charger. The portable battery jumper my dad had given me for my 18th birthday. For emergencies, he'd said with a self-satisfied smile, as if he'd just imparted some great fatherly wisdom. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I zipped the bag, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard the dizziness flared up again. I leaned against my desk, breathing through my nose, focusing on the wobbly ceiling fan one last time. 45 minutes later, I was standing by my car duffel bag slung over my shoulder. Mom stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching. She didn't offer to help. She didn't say goodbye. She just watched her face, a blank mask, as I popped the hood and hooked up the jumper cables. The engine sputtered, caught, and then roared to life with a rattling cough. The sound was both a relief and a death sentence. Now I had no excuse to stay. I threw my bag in the passenger seat and got behind the wheel, not looking at her. I put the car in reverse, my foot trembling on the gas pedal. As I backed out of the driveway, I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway I'd parked in every day for 2 years. I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was already gone. The front door was shut. The first night, I parked in the back corner of a 2-4-hour Walmart lot. I pushed the passenger seat back as far as it would go and tried to sleep, but the weird orange glow of the parking lot lights bled through my eyelids. Every passing car sounded like a threat. My stomach growled, a hollow, aching protest. I had $38 left after putting $5 of gas in the tank. I was homeless. The word echoed in the cramped, stale air of the car. Homeless. 2 days passed in a miserable haze. I used the Walmart bathroom to wash my face. I bought a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter. I spent hours at the public library using their Wi-Fi to fill out more applications until the words blurred together. I got one email back, "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to move forward with other candidates." The rejection felt personal now, another nail in my coffin. On the 3rd day my phone buzzed. It was a group text from my mom. My dad and grandma were in the chat. Asterisk. Don't forget, Father's Day lunch is at Grandma's house on Sunday, 1 p.m. See you there, asterisk. I stared at the message. It was so completely absurdly normal. It was like she hadn't thrown me out on the street 3 days ago. Like I wasn't currently reading her text from a library parking lot because it was the only place I could get a signal and charge my phone. A laugh escaped my lips, a harsh, dry sound. I typed back my thumbs, moving with a cold fury. Asterisk. I'm not coming. Asterisk. My dad replied almost instantly. Asterisk. Don't be like that, Jackson. Asterisk. Asterisk. Like what times I typed. Asterisk. Homeless. I don't have enough gas to get to Grandma's. It's over 30 miles away. Asterisk. My grandma added her outer voice to the chorus. A voice I usually loved, now dripping with a syrupy, manipulative sweetness. Asterisk. Jackson, honey. I made your favorite cherry pie. We're all looking forward to seeing you. Everyone will miss my presence. Asterisk. Asterisk presents times I almost threw the phone. Asterisk. You want me to show up with presents? I'm living in my car. Asterisk. The phone rang. It was my mom. I let it go to voicemail, but she called right back. I knew she wouldn't stop. I finally answered, pressing the phone to my ear. What is your problem? She snapped. No, hello, no preamble. My problem, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I didn't know I had. My problem is that my own mother kicked me out with an hour's notice and now expects me to show up to a family party and pretend everything is fine. We are trying to include you, she said, her voice rising to match mine. We care about you, and this is how you treat us, by throwing a pity party for yourself. Your father is hurt. Hurt, I screamed into the phone, not caring who heard me in the quiet parking lot. He's hurt. Good, I hope he is. You can tell the man you're celebrating the Father of the Year that his son is sleeping in a goddamn Toyota Camry because of him, because of both of you. You are being so dramatic, she spit back. This is exactly why we had to do what we did. You're manipulative and you refuse to take responsibility for yourself. Responsibility, I begged you for help. I told you I was sick. You didn't care. You just wanted me gone. But you still want me to show up for the family photo, don't you? You still want to be able to tell your friends that we all had a lovely Father's Day lunch together. There was a pause on the other end. I heard her take a sharp breath. You're breaking your grandmother's heart, she said, her voice dropping to a low, guilt-laden whisper. That was it. The final play. The last-ditch effort to reel me back in. But the line had already snapped. I saw it all with a blinding, painful clarity. They didn't care about me. They cared about the idea of me, the son who plays his part, the happy family that doesn't exist. My well-being was an inconvenience to their narrative. My suffering was just me being dramatic. No, I said, my voice suddenly calm, steady. You are. All of you. I ended the call. My hands were steady now. I opened the group text, my finger hovering over the screen. Dad had sent another message. Asterisk. Just show up, Jackson. Stop making this a big deal. Asterisk. He still didn't get it. He never would. They wanted me to participate in the charade. They wanted me to pretend that the man who confirmed my eviction with a single word deserved to be celebrated. They wanted me to smile, eat cherry pie, and act like I wasn't counting the change in my cup holder to see if I could afford another gallon of gas. They thought lighting a fire under me would make me grow up. They were right. It did. The fire had burned away every last scrap of obligation I ever felt towards them. I typed out one final message. Asterisk. I owe you nothing. Asterisk. I sent it. Then, one by one, I blocked their numbers. Mom, Dad, Grandma. It was a strange hollow feeling, like amputating a part of myself that had already gone septic. I started the car. The gas needle was hovering just above E. I had enough to get somewhere. For the first time in my life, it wouldn't be toward any of them. I pulled out of the library parking lot and turned left, away from the direction of my grandmother's house. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I wasn't going back. That was my present to them. That was my revenge.
Story 11.
The wine was good, a 12-year-old Cabernet to match our 12-year anniversary. The kids, Leo and Mia, were actually behaving coloring quietly at the table while Sarah and I finished our steak. I raised my glass. To 12 years, I said, trying to catch her eye. And to at least 12 more. She gave me a thin smile and clinked her glass against mine. To 12 years. She didn't add the second part. I told myself I was imagining the distance in her eyes. It had been there for months, a subtle fog I couldn't quite navigate. I figured it was stress. Her new clothing boutique was finally taking off, but the hours were long. Later, after the kids were in bed and the dishwasher was humming, I found Leo's iPad on the kitchen counter. A little green bubble with a 1-inch, it was floating over the messages icon. I almost ignored it, but I figured it was probably a message from his cousin he'd forgotten to answer. I tapped it open. The message wasn't from his cousin. It was at the top of the list, a synced iMessage from Sarah's phone. The contact name was Mark Work. The text read, "Times I can't stop thinking about last night. The way you looked at me. God, I need you again. Soon. Asterisk." My blood went cold. My hands started to shake. I scrolled up. There were dozens of them. Photos I didn't recognize. Sarah smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, sitting across a table from some guy. More texts. Flirtatious, then explicit. My stomach twisted into a knot of ice and acid. I scrolled to the bottom to the very first message. The date stamp was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. I walked upstairs, the iPad feeling like a lead weight in my hand. Sarah was in bed, scrolling on her phone, bathed in that sterile blue light. She didn't look up when I came in. I didn't say anything. I just held out the iPad. She glanced at the screen, then at my face. There was no panic in her eyes, no shock. Just a flat, weary recognition. "Oh," she said, as if I just pointed out a spot on the carpet. That, my voice was a choked whisper. "Sarah, what is this?" She finally put her phone down and looked at me. No tears, no shame. Just a chilling sort of calm. "I'm seeing someone, Larry." Just like that. A 12-year marriage, 2 kids, a whole life detonated by 4 simple words. My first thought, the only one that broke through the static in my head, was for the kids. "We can fix this," I said, the words feeling stupid and hollow as they came out. "We can go to therapy. We can work on it. For Leo and Mia." She gave a little shrug. "If you want to." Therapy was a joke. I went in hoping to find a bridge back to my wife. She went in with a flamethrower. The therapist, a woman with kind eyes and a professional poker face, would ask a gentle probing question, and Sarah would unload. "I've just been so unhappy," she said in our first session, twisting the ring I gave her. "Larry's always been so controlling." I stared at her. "Controlling, I refinanced the house to fund your boutique. I do drop-offs, pickups, 90% of the cooking. When have I ever controlled you?" "See," she said, turning to the therapist. "He gets defensive. He can't just listen. He has to make it about everything he's times for me, like I owe him something." It was insane. It was like watching someone describe a movie I'd never seen. The next week it got worse. I think the problem is I finally met my soulmate, she announced, as if she were talking about the weather. The therapist blinked. Your soulmate? Mark, she said, a dreamy look on her face. He just gets me. For the first time, I feel like I can be my actual self. I haven't been my true self in over a decade. You've known him for a month, Sarah, I said, my voice rising. A month. We have a life. We have children. This isn't about the kids, Larry, she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. This is about my happiness. Don't you want me to be happy? I started noticing how her best friend Chloe was always around. Chloe, who had been divorced twice and seemed to thrive on drama. She'd whisper with Sarah in the kitchen while I was putting the kids to bed. I'd walk in and they'd go silent, shooting me identical looks of disdain. I heard snippets. You deserve this. Don't let him guilt you. It's your time now. Chloe was the gasoline on the fire. The blame shifting was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Our happy memories were retroactively tainted. A family vacation to the beach, I was faking it for the kids. I felt so trapped. The day I brought her lunch at her shop, that was you checking up on me. You never trusted me. She was rewriting 12 years of history, recasting me as the villain in a story where I thought I was the husband. It came to a head after our 4th therapy session. It had been another hour of her painting me as a manipulative monster. I drove home in a daze, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I was trying to hold on, trying to find some piece of the woman I married in the cold stranger sitting next to me. That night after the kids were asleep, I found her in the living room packing a small bag. Where are you going? I asked, my heart pounding. To Chloe, she said, not looking at me. I need some space. Sarah, please, I begged. My pride was gone. I was just a man watching his world crumble. Don't do this. Think about our family. Think about Leo and Mia. Think about everything we built. She finally stopped packing. She turned around slowly, and the look on her face was one I'll never forget. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was empty. A total terrifying void. You know, Larry, she said, her voice quiet and steady. My only regret is that I didn't do this sooner. The mediation room was beige and soulless, just like the process itself. We sat at opposite ends of a polished table that felt a mile long. Lawyers on either side, a neutral mediator at the head. Sarah wouldn't look at me. She just stared at a spot on the wall, her jaw set. Chloe had driven her, of course. I could practically feel the toxic encouragement radiating from the waiting room. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Ellen, had prepped me for a war. She'll fight for the house, the business, and she'll use the kids as leverage. Be ready for it. The mediator cleared his throat. We'll start with the most important issue, the children. Mr. Davis, your proposal is for an 80/20 timeshare in your favor. That's correct, I said, my voice steady. I believe it's in Leo and Mia's best interest to have stability. Sarah's lawyer, a smug guy in a suit too tight for his frame, gave a thin smile. My client is a devoted mother. He was cut off. By Sarah? Just give it to him, she said, her voice flat. Everyone at the table stopped. Even her own lawyer looked surprised. Sarah, he prompted. She finally turned her head, but she looked at the mediator, not me. He can have them 80% of the time, weekends, holidays, whatever. I agree. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't relief. It was a cold, sickening shock. There was no fight, no tears, no feigned concern for the kids she claimed to be so unhappy without. It was a business transaction. Her lawyer recovered quickly. In light of my client's generous concession regarding the children, he said, the word generous? Landing like a punch to my gut, we expect equal generosity regarding the assets. Specifically, a full buyout of her share of the marital home and a cash settlement equivalent to 70% of the boutique's current valuation. And there it was. The price tag. She wasn't giving me the kids, she was selling them. Selling 12 years of bedtimes, stories, scraped knees, and school plays for a bigger check. She was funding her new life with Mark on the bones of her old one. I looked at her, then really looked at her, and the last shred of the woman I married was gone. In her place was a stranger. A cold, calculating stranger who saw her own children as a bargaining chip. Ellen leaned over. Larry, this is unprecedented. This is everything we wanted on the custody front. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. We accept, Ellen said. It was over in 2 hours. She traded our family for her fantasy. As we were packing up our briefcases, she finally looked at me. There was no remorse in her eyes. Only a flicker of something like triumph. I hope you're happy, Sarah, I said, the words tasting like ash. I will be, she replied, and walked out of the room without looking back. 4 years can feel like a lifetime or no time at all. In that time, the kids and I found our rhythm. Our house, once heavy with tension, was now filled with Lego explosions, movie nights, and the smell of slightly burnt pizza. I became an expert at French braids for Mia, and at helping Leo with his ridiculously complex Minecraft worlds. We were a team. A bruised, battered, but resilient team. Their weekends with Sarah were a different story. They'd come home quiet and withdrawn. It took me a while to figure out why. One Sunday night, Mia, now 10, was picking at her dinner. What's wrong, sweetie? I asked. She pushed a piece of chicken around her plate. Mommy cried today. My stomach tightened. Oh, why was she sad? She said it's hard living in her small apartment because you took the big house and all her money, Mia mumbled, not meeting my eyes. She said you wanted to punish her for being happy. There it was. The poison. A slow, steady drip of it every other weekend. I took a deep breath, pushing down the white-hot rage that wanted to erupt. Yelling wouldn't help. Bad-mouthing their mother would only make me the same as her. Mia, look at me, I said gently. She lifted her head, her eyes full of confusion. Grown-up problems are complicated. It's not your job to worry about them. Your mom and I both made choices. The most important thing for you to know is that this is your home. You are safe here, you are loved, and you will always have everything you need. Okay. She nodded, but the seed was planted. I knew I'd be weeding that particular garden for years to come. The final confirmation of her choices came not from the kids, but from an old friend who called me out of the blue. Larry, hey man. Listen, this is weird, but I thought you should know. He started hesitantly. I saw Sarah's baby announcement on Chloe's Instagram. The words hit me, but they didn't hurt. They were just information. Baby, I didn't know she was pregnant. Yeah, little girl, he said. The weird thing is, well, Mark was there. In the picture. And his wife, his actual Times wife, just posted a family photo from a ski trip last week. With their kids. I don't get it, man. Is he living a double life or something? Of course he was. Mark never left his wife. He was never going to. Sarah hadn't found a soulmate. She'd found a parasite. And she'd mistaken the fever for passion. She'd had his baby while he was still married to and living with someone else. The next time she dropped off the kids, she told me her big news. Mark and I are moving, she announced, avoiding my gaze as Leo and Mia ran inside. To Austin. His company is opening an office there. It's a fresh start for us. Us. The baby was in a car seat in the back. her new life. He's moving to Austin, I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Is his wife going with him? The color drained from her face. For the first time in 4 years, I saw a genuine crack in her armor of self-righteousness. She didn't have a comeback. She didn't have a rewritten history for that. That's none of your business, she finally spat and got back in her car. She was running. Chasing a fantasy to another state, abandoning her first 2 children for a man who would never fully be hers. She hadn't just left our marriage, she had left her entire life, and was now a supporting character in someone else's. I watched her drive away, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just a profound, quiet pity. My revenge wasn't some grand act. I didn't have to do a thing. My revenge was the happy, stable home I had built from the wreckage. It was Leo's laughter from the living room and Mia asking if we could bake cookies. My revenge was that I had won. I'd won my kids, my peace, and my life, while she was left with the consequences. She had chosen her path, and I was finally truly free of it.
Story 12.
For 2 years, the wall separating my townhouse from theirs might as well have been made of paper. The soundtrack to my life was their marriage imploding in real time. I didn't know their favorite colors or their political leanings, but I knew Jack was a useless, pathetic excuse for a man and Jill was a dramatic, blood-sucking harpy. Their words, not mine. I just had the misfortune of a front row seat. I'm Nancy. My husband Mark and I moved into this neat little row of suburban homes, thinking we'd found a quiet slice of peace. We were wrong. Next door lived Jack and Jill. Yes, really. The irony wasn't lost on me. Their fights were legendary. They weren't quiet, simmering arguments. They were full-blown, window-rattling spectacles. It always followed the same script. The shouting would start usually around 8 p.m., escalating until Jill's voice hit a piercing shriek. Then came the finale, the slam of the front door and the sound of Jack's car peeling out of the driveway. Jill would then usually throw something against our shared wall for good measure. A plate, a shoe, maybe a small appliance. It was hard to tell. Mark would just shake his head. Someone should call someone, he'd mutter into his book, and say what I'd reply. My neighbors are loud and hate each other. That's not a crime. We weren't friends. We were neighbors, in the most literal sense of the word. We shared a wall and a strange silent understanding that we would never acknowledge the chaos we both knew was happening. A polite nod while getting the mail was the extent of our relationship. I didn't want to be involved. Jill had a razor wire personality. You could feel the hostility radiating off her, even from 10 feet away. Then came the last fight. It was different. The volume was the same, but the finality in her voice was new. "Get out," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I swear to God, Jack, if you are still here in the morning, I will burn all your things on the lawn." The door slammed harder than ever. The car engine roared to life, and then faded into the distance. But this time there was no crashing sound against the wall. There was just silence. A heavy, unnerving quiet that felt louder than the shouting. The next morning, I was watering the petunias on my porch when I saw him. Jack was loading 2 enormous suitcases into the back of a waiting airport taxi. He wasn't frantic or angry. He looked hollowed out, defeated but calm. He moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who had made a decision and wasn't looking back. He saw me watching. He didn't smile. He just gave me a single tired nod. It was a nod that said, "Times I'm done. It's over. You won't be hearing us anymore." Asterisk. He slid into the back of the cab and it pulled away from the curb, turning the corner and disappearing. I never saw him again. Later, through the neighborhood grapevine, I heard he'd taken a job transfer to Singapore. He didn't just leave the house. He left the continent. The silence that followed was glorious. For 3 days, my home was my own. No screaming, no slamming, no late-night drama. Mark and I actually sat on our back patio and had a conversation without being interrupted by a torrent of abuse from next door. It was bliss. The bliss ended on a Thursday morning. I was heading out to my car, juggling my laptop bag and a travel mug of coffee when my front door was practically blocked. It was Jill. She looked like she'd been dragged through a hedge backward and then set on fire. Her hair was a matted mess, her eyes were puffy and bloodshot, and she was wearing a stained bathrobe that looked like it had seen better days. A decade ago. "Nancy," she said, her voice a raw croak. "Thank God, I need you." I froze my keys halfway to the car door lock. This was new. In 2 years, she had never spoken more than 3 consecutive words to me. "Jill, is everything okay?" I asked a stupid, reflexive question. Of course, nothing was okay. "No, it's not okay," she snapped, her voice already rising with that familiar frantic edge. "He's gone. He actually did it. Jack is gone." She gestured vaguely toward the sky as if he'd ascended into the heavens instead of catching a flight to Asia. He drained the joint account and left me with the kids. And the mortgage. I stood there unsure of what to say. "I'm sorry to hear that." She waved a dismissive hand, cutting through my pathetic attempt at sympathy. "Yeah, well, sorry doesn't help me. I have a problem. A big one." She didn't wait for an invitation. She just launched into it, pacing back and forth on my small patch of lawn like a caged animal. "My shift at the hospital starts at 6 a.m., she said, stabbing a finger in the air for emphasis. "Which means I have to be out of the house by 5:30 latest. The kids Aiden and Chloe, they can't be left alone." He always did the morning routine because his job was flexible. Now he's gone, and I have no one. My mother lives in Florida, his parents hate me, the feeling's mutual. And I don't have any friends around here. I could see why. I just nodded, my brain screaming at me to make an excuse to get in my car and drive away. But I was trapped, pinned by the sheer force of her desperation. So she said finally, stopping her pacing to stand directly in front of me, her bloodshot eyes boring into mine. "Here's what needs to happen." My eyebrows shot up. Asterisk. What needs to happen times. Not "I was hoping you could help." Or "Is there any chance you could?" No, this was a directive. A battle plan. "I'll bring them over to you at 5 in the morning, she stated, as if we'd already discussed and agreed to this. "You can give them breakfast. Cereal is fine. Aiden likes the sugary kind. Chloe is picky. Then you'll need to drive Aiden to elementary school. Bell rings at 8. Chloe's daycare is the other direction you'll have to drop her off after. It opens at 7:30. I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand and kept going, a runaway train of demands. Pickup is at 3 for Aiden and 5 for Chloe. You can bring them back here, get Aiden started on his homework. He's bad at math, so you'll have to sit with him. Then you can make them dinner. Nothing fancy. They like mac and cheese or chicken nuggets. I should be home around 7, maybe 7:30 if traffic is bad. My jaw was now somewhere around my ankles. I was speechless, utterly paralyzed by the audacity of it all. It was so far beyond a normal request that my brain couldn't even process how to refuse. She took a deep breath. Not done yet. "Oh, and weekends? I'm going to have to pick up extra shifts to make ends meet, so I'll need you to have them on Saturdays, probably Sundays too. Full days, obviously." She finally finished, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She looked at me, her head tilted as if she had just solved the world's most complex puzzle. As if she'd just handed me a gift, an opportunity, instead of a life sentence of unpaid, round-the-clock servitude for the children of a woman I couldn't stand. So she said, clapping her hands together softly, the sound like a gavel, "Is tomorrow at 5 too soon to start?" I stared at her, the travel mug of coffee, suddenly feeling very heavy in my hand. For a split second, I thought it was a joke. A very, very bad joke delivered by a woman with zero sense of humor. My brain cycled through a dozen responses from screaming to just turning around and walking back into my house. What came out was a short, sharp bark of laughter. Jill's face, already a roadmap of stress, tightened into a knot of confusion. "What's so funny?" "You," I said, unable to stop a second laugh from escaping. "You're funny. Hilarious, actually." Her eyes narrowed. "I'm not joking, Nancy. I'm in a crisis." "No, you're not in a crisis," I corrected her, my voice dropping the humor and picking up a steely edge. "You're in a situation of your own making, and you've just presented me with a full-time job description. So let's talk business. What are you paying?" Jill blinked, genuinely stunned. "Paying," she repeated, as if I just asked her to explain quantum physics in Greek. "Yes. Pay. Money. Compensation," I clarified, ticking the words off on my fingers. "You've outlined a job that's roughly 90 hours a week. It includes childcare, a chauffeur service, tutoring, and a personal chef for 2 children. That's a professional nanny, a driver, and a cook all rolled into one. So what's the salary? I assume it's competitive given the outrageous hours." She scoffed, a nasty, incredulous sound that scraped at my last nerve. "Hey you, don't be ridiculous. I can't afford that. I told you, I have no friends and no one else to ask. You're my neighbor. You're supposed to times help, asterisk." The sheer unadulterated entitlement of that statement was breathtaking. It was like she thought proximity came with a contractual obligation to solve her life problems. All my neighborly politeness evaporated. "Listen to me very carefully, Jill," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. Absolutely not. The answer isn't just no, it's hell no. It's, are you out of your ever-loving mind? No. I am not your friend. I am not your family. I am certainly not your unpaid servant. I am the woman who has had to listen to you scream at your husband for 2 years straight. The fact that you have no one else to turn to is a direct result of how you treat people. It is not my problem to solve. I took a step toward my car, finally breaking the invisible wall of her desperation that had held me captive. Her face contorted with rage. "You selfish bitch," she shrieked, finding her familiar volume. "My kids are going to suffer because of you." "No," I said, turning the key in my car door lock. "Your kids are suffering because their father fled to another continent to get away from you. Think about that." I didn't wait for a reply. I slid into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Jill stood on my lawn, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, her face a mask of purple fury. I started the engine, backed out of my driveway without a second glance, and drove away, my heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and righteous anger. That evening, I was chopping onions with probably a little more force than necessary when I told Mark the whole story. I recounted her list of demands, her schedule, her expectation, that it would all be for the low, low price of nothing. He listened, his fork suspended over his plate of pasta, his expression growing more astonished with every detail. When I finished with my final line about Jack fleeing the continent, he finally spoke. "Wow," he breathed out, setting his fork down. "That is completely insane." "Right," I said, relieved. "I thought I was losing my mind." He was quiet for a long moment, swirling the noodles on his plate. "But Nan," he started slowly, and I could already hear the but I didn't want to hear. "Don't you think you were a little harsh?" I stopped chopping, the knife still in my hand. "Harsh Mark," she asked me to dedicate my entire life to her children for free. I know, the request was ridiculous," he conceded, holding up a hand. "But calling her out like that, saying it was her fault Jack left. I don't know, the woman is clearly drowning. And what about Aiden and Chloe? They're just little kids caught in the middle. Maybe we should offer to at least help sometimes. For the kids' sake." I put the knife down with a loud clatter and turned to face him fully. Are you serious, Mark? You've heard her. You've heard them. She is a nasty, vitriolic person. Do you honestly believe for 1 second that helping sometimes would stay? Sometimes it would be an inch that she would take for a marathon? She would never, ever reciprocate. If our positions were reversed, she'd be selling tickets to watch her house burn. That's a bit of an exaggeration, he muttered. Is it? I challenged. We've lived next to her for 2 years. Have you ever seen her be kind to anyone? To Jack, to the mailman, to her own children when they're playing too loud? No. She's a black hole of negativity. You want to help for the kids' sake. The best thing for those kids would be if she learned that her actions have consequences. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just feel bad for them. I feel bad for them too, I said, my voice softening slightly. But my setting myself on fire is not going to keep them warm. It'll just get me burned. Mark, her entire life is imploding because of who she is. Her husband didn't just move across town, he moved across the Times, planet Asterisk. That's not a separation, that's an evacuation. She has no friends because she's incapable of friendship. People aren't things to be used when you're in a jam. She's learning that the hard way, and I refuse to be her lesson plan. He didn't argue further. He just nodded and quietly went back to eating his pasta. The conflict wasn't resolved, but the debate was over. I had drawn my line in the sand, and I wasn't budging. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I glanced out the window. The lights were on next door. Through her sheer curtains, I could see Jill's silhouette as she paced back and forth in her living room, a phone pressed to her ear. She was gesticulating wildly, her body language radiating the same frantic, angry energy I'd seen on my lawn that morning. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I knew the sound of her desperation. It was the same sound that had driven her husband 8,000 miles away and left her utterly, completely alone. And for the first time in 2 years, the noise from next door didn't bother me at all.
Story 13.
Last year's vacation was a 7-day hostage situation where the kidnappers were my 3 nephews. I'm 23, and since graduating college and moving back home to save up for a deposit on a house, my official family title has become the unpaid help. This glorious role reached its peak at a beachfront hotel in a room I was forced to share with my sister's kids. Let me paint you a picture. The main bed went to Liam, who is 8 and believes sleep is for the weak. The other bed was for the 5-year-old twin agents of chaos, Noah and Sam. My bed, a pull-out couch with a metal bar strategically placed to fuse with my spine. My alarm clock was Cocomelon at 5:45 a.m., followed by demands for juice wrestling matches that used my stomach as a trampoline and the constant sticky residue of a half-eaten granola bar being wiped on my arm. I saw the beach 3 times. Once to build a sandcastle under duress, once to retrieve a runaway kite, and once to sprint after Noah, who had decided to become one with the seagulls. The rest of the time I was the on-call babysitter while my sister Chloe and her husband Mark enjoyed romantic dinners, long walks on the beach, and an actual vacation. When I tried to complain, my mom just waved her hand dismissively. Logan, we paid for your room. The least you can do is help your sister out. She has her hands full. My dad just nodded. Family helps family, son. That was the line. Family helps family. In my family, it's a one-way street. It means Logan helps Chloe, the golden child, who can do no wrong. It means my time, my energy, and my sanity are all disposable resources for her convenience. So when we were all at my parents' place for Sunday dinner a few weeks ago, and my mom clapped her hands together with a giddy smile, I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. I have the best news, she announced. I know how much everyone loved the beach last year, so I booked it again, same week in July, same hotel, everything. She and my dad beamed, looking around the table, waiting for applause. Chloe lit up already, pulling out her phone probably to shop for new bikinis. Mark gave me a tired, sympathetic glance before turning his attention back to his kids who were currently trying to build a fort out of mashed potatoes. They all looked at me. I was the last holdout. I just stared back my fork frozen over my plate. My dad cleared his throat. "Well, isn't that great, Logan?" I put my fork down. I took a slow sip of water. I'd been thinking about this moment for a year. I'd rehearsed it in the shower in my car while lying awake at 3 a.m. "That's great, Mom," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm glad we're going." A wave of relief washed over their faces. Chloe smirked a little. I knew you'd cave expression she'd perfected since childhood. "Just one thing," I continued, letting the silence hang for a second. "I'll be driving down separately, and I've already booked and paid for my own room." The quiet that followed was deafening. My dad's fork clattered onto his plate. My mom's smile evaporated. Chloe was the first to speak, her voice sharp and laced with disbelief. "You what?" "I booked my own room," I repeated, looking directly at her. "King bed, ocean view, no pull-out couch." "What are you talking about?" She snapped her phone, now forgotten on the table. "We're a family. We stay together. The connecting rooms worked perfectly last year." "They worked perfectly for you times," I countered. "They didn't work for me." "Last year wasn't a vacation for me, Chloe. It was a week-long babysitting gig that I paid for with my sanity." "Oh, here we go," she scoffed, rolling her eyes so hard I'm surprised they didn't fall out. "You're being so dramatic." "My boys love you. They love spending time with their uncle." "I love them too. But I also love sleeping past 6 a.m. and reading a book without having juice spilled on it. I'm going to the beach to have a vacation, my own vacation." My mother finally found her voice. "Logan, this is ridiculous. You're deliberately trying to cause problems. Your sister needs your help." "Then she and Mark can help each other," I said. "Or they can hire a babysitter. My services are no longer available." Chloe's face turned a blotchy, furious red. This wasn't just an inconvenience for her. It was an act of rebellion. The family peon was refusing to do his job. "So, that's it," she shrieked, her voice rising. "You're just going to abandon me with my own children. You're going to be off in your own fancy room while I'm stuck dealing with everything. You're ruining this entire trip." "Chloe, calm down," my dad said, though he was looking at me. "Logan, this isn't the way. We're a family." "That's right," I said, pushing my chair back and standing up. "And this family is about to learn that I'm a part of it, not just the staff. The room is booked. It's non-refundable. I'll see you all there." I walked out, leaving a stunned, simmering silence behind me. My phone started buzzing before I even got to my car. A text from my mom times, "You are being incredibly selfish. I am so disappointed in you." Asterisk. Then my dad times, "Call your sister. You need to apologize and fix this." Asterisk. Then a novel from Chloe. A furious, rambling wall of text about how I was an ungrateful, lazy leech who never did anything for anyone, and how dare I do this to her. I ignored them all. I drove home, turned my phone on silent, and for the first time in a long time felt a flicker of control. They'd get over it. They had to. For the next 2 days, the barrage was relentless. A constant stream of guilt trips, demands, and passive-aggressive comments in the family group chat. I held firm. I replied to my parents with a simple, "My decision is final," and I didn't reply to Chloe at all. I felt isolated, like I was the crazy one. Was I selfish? Was I ruining the family vacation? The doubt started to creep in. So I did what any sane person in the 21st century does when they feel like they're losing their mind. I went to the internet for a second opinion. I wrote it all out anonymously on Reddit. The whole story. Last year's nightmare vacation, the golden child sister, the enabling parents, the expectation that I, the 2-3-year-old single guy, should sacrifice my time and money so my sister could have a subsidized nanny. I hit post and walked away, not knowing what to expect. An hour later, I had 100 comments. Then 500. Then 1,000. They were all on my side. NTA, not the asshole, was everywhere. People shared their own stories. The validation was overwhelming, a tidal wave of support that washed away all my self-doubt. I wasn't selfish. I was right. My boundary was reasonable. I fell asleep that night feeling vindicated, empowered even. I woke up the next morning to an email notification. Then a text. Then my phone started ringing. It was a number from work, so I answered expecting it to be about a project. Logan? The voice on the other end was ice cold. It was Chloe. How did you get this number? I asked, sitting bolt upright in bed. That doesn't matter, she hissed. Her voice was trembling with a rage that felt volcanic. What matters is the post. I saw it, Logan. My friend sent it to me. Everyone is sending it to me. You posted our private family business all over the internet for strangers to see. My blood ran cold. You have 5 minutes to take it down, she seethed. 5 minutes, or I swear to God you will regret this for the rest of your life. I held the phone away from my ear, her voice a tinny shriek of pure venom. My thumb shaking slightly found the record button on my screen. A small red dot appeared. Game on. You're threatening me, I asked, keeping my voice calm. It was a struggle. Take it down, she repeated each word, a clipped, violent command. You made me a laughingstock. You made our family look like a joke. Our family's been treating me like a joke for years, Chloe. I just wrote down the punchline. People seem to agree it's not very funny. A strangled sound came down the line, a mix of a sob and a scream. You think a bunch of pathetic internet strangers matter more than your own sister, more than your nephews? This isn't about them, it's about you. It's always been about you, she shrieked, the victim act in full swing. Poor Logan, forced to spend a week at the beach. Poor Logan, who has to hang out with his own family. You know what your problem is. You have no life, you live at home, you have no girlfriend, no real commitments. Your only job is to be there for family. That's what your time's for, asterisk. There it was. The quiet part screamed out loud. I wasn't a brother. I was a utility. A resource to be used. The recording icon on my screen felt like the most powerful weapon I'd ever owned. Take it down, Logan. Now. No, I said simply. The line went dead. An hour later, my parents' car pulled into my driveway. I was waiting for them. They marched to my front door like a two-person firing squad, my mom's face a mask of disappointment, my dad set in grim resolve. This has gone too far, my mom began the second I opened the door, not even waiting to come inside. Your sister's a complete wreck. You posted her private business, our private business, online for the world to tear apart. You need to delete that post and you need to call her and apologize. I'm not doing either of those things, I said, stepping aside to let them in. Don't be stubborn, my dad said, his voice low in warning. You made your point. Now it's time to be the bigger person and smooth things over. Be the bigger person, I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. That's just code for let Chloe win, so we can all pretend this didn't happen. That's not happening this time. She's your sister, my mom cried, her hands flying up in exasperation. She says you're twisting things, that you're making her out to be some kind of monster. Is she? I asked quietly. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I'm glad you're both here. I want you to hear something. I found the recording and hit play. The air in my small living room grew thick and still as Chloe's voice, raw and unfiltered, filled the space. I watched my parents' faces. I saw the initial anger at me, the assumption that I had somehow provoked her slowly curdle into something else. When the line times, you have no life. That's what your 4 times echoed in the quiet room. My mom flinched as if she'd been slapped. My dad just stared at the floor, his jaw working silently. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. My dad finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. "She said that to you?" I just nodded. My mom sank onto the arm of my sofa, her face pale. I didn't know she felt that way. I thought she just needed a little help. "You didn't know because you never listened," I said, the accusation soft but sharp. "You only ever listened to her." Before anyone could say another word, my phone buzzed. It was Mark, my brother-in-law. I almost ignored it, but a gut feeling told me to answer. I put it on speaker. "Logan, thank God you answered. I am so sorry." His voice was ragged. "Mark, what's going on?" "I saw the Reddit post," he said, and I heard him take a deep, shaky breath. "A buddy from work sent it to me, didn't know it was about us. At first I was furious at you. But then, something you wrote stuck out. The part about being the unpaid help." My parents were now staring at the phone like it was a cobra. "Logan," Mark continued, his voice dropping. "For the last year since that first beach trip, I've been giving Chloe $300 a month in cash. I told her it was for you. For babysitting, for helping out, for, being an awesome uncle. She told me she was giving it to you." The blood drained from my mother's face. My dad closed his eyes. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was the sheer breathtaking audacity of the lie. She wasn't just using me. She was profiting off me. "She kept it, didn't she?" Mark asked, his voice dead. "I never saw a dime, Mark," I said. A string of curses exploded from the phone. "I'm going to the bank. I'm transferring you every cent she took, plus interest. I can't believe this. I am so sorry, man. We'll be over tonight. We are going to fix this." He hung up. My parents looked broken. The carefully constructed image of their perfect daughter, their golden child, had been sledgehammered into dust in the space of 10 minutes. Chloe and Mark arrived that evening. She wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were puffy and red, but not from sadness. From humiliation. Mark handed me a check, his face a mixture of shame and anger. "Apologize to your brother," he commanded her. Chloe mumbled something at the floor. "Look at him and say it," Mark insisted. She finally lifted her head, and the venom was back. "I'm sorry," she bit out the words, sounding like poison on her tongue. Then her attention snapped to me. "Now, take down the posts. All of them." I leaned back on my couch. "No." "What?" she shrieked. "After all this, after Mark paid you back, you have to..." "I don't have to do anything," I said, looking from her to my parents. "Those posts stay up. Consider them my insurance policy. They're a public record of what happens when I'm taken for granted. They're a reminder that this family is going to have boundaries now, whether you like it or not." I held her gaze. "You want them down, fine. Let's have a year of you treating me like a brother instead of an employee. Let's see you respect my time and my life. Let's have a family vacation where we all act like an actual family. You prove to me that things have changed, and maybe I'll consider it." Humiliation burned in her eyes. She had no power here. The money was gone, the lies were exposed, and her leverage was ash. For the first time in my entire life, I had all the cards. She stormed out. Mark gave me one last apologetic look before following her. My parents just sat there. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. So, the vacation is still on. Yeah, I said, a small, genuine smile touching my lips for the first time all day. The vacation is on. I'll see you there. I'll be in my own room.